One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was released in 1975 as an overnight classic, telling the story of convicted felon R.P. McMurphy in his time in an Oregon mental institute. It was a critical darling, award smash, and now key touchstone in the careers of Jack Nicholson and director Miloš Forman. My name's John, and the nuts with guts with me are Matt.
Juicy fruit.
And Westy.
Jump up there and stuff it in the basket, Chief!
It's 1963 and all the right movies are on the Disturbed ward. I know what you're thinking. Why don't you shut your goddamn mouth and play some music? Hello and welcome to All the Right Movies, the Thieves Brigade, the Mental Defective League, and a podcast on classic and hit films.
Yep, that's everything.
Yep, that we are.
Today's episode, we've got a real classic to get into, don't we?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
We have the definition of classic,
Yeah.
I think.
We're with Miloš Forman for the first time and Jack Nicholson not for the first time as we talk 1975's legendary One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yep.
Oh, yes.
Sounds great.
Before we get the straight jackets out, though, we're talking about Patreon once again. If you like what we do on this, our classic podcast, and you're listening to it, so surely you do, if you'd like us to carry on doing it, you can help support that by becoming an All the Right Movies patron. Patrons get access to our bonus podcast episode called Double Feature, and access to our whole archive of bonus episodes and classic episodes like this one. The archive's huge now, and we have a load of other classics in there. I said it's not our first time with Jack Nicholson, and The Shining is there,
Yep.
as is The Departed,
Yes,
and many, many, many more episodes.
Many more.
They're like your very own electroconvulsive therapy.
Very much so, yeah. Have you paying out in silver dollars, hopefully.
So to find out more and sign up, please visit patreon.com/all the right movies.
Yes, please do, guys. Just have a look, see what you think.
Yeah.
For now, though, back to Oregon. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So why do you suggest this one, Westy?
Well, I mean, it has to be spoken about, doesn't it? I mean, a very, very powerful film, very thought-provoking film, a very necessary film, and unfortunately still a very relevant film even today.
Yeah.
I think it sings true even now, so I think it's a good time to bring this one up and talk about it and try not to be too serious about it. I mean, it's a very funny film,
It's hilarious.
of course, but all of that it's trying to address and all that it's trying to say. I mean, I came to this one fairly late. I mean, I was mid-20s, and it was all the, Five Easy Pieces, Easy Rider, Cuckoo's Nest, got to get the Jack Nicholson kind of that trilogy in there.
Yeah.
And I was impressed with all three of them, but this one especially stayed with us for a very, very long time. It's not one I can watch or rewatch regularly, but every time I do, it moves us to, think differently about things, and it really is one of them incredibly powerful films. So what I will say, if you haven't seen the film, stop what you're doing, take the dog home, take your headphones off, whatever you do, and just go and watch this film and then come back to us. It is so worth it. It is so powerful. It is so brilliant, and I'm very excited to talk about it.
Yeah, when I first started getting into film was when I was like a teenager. I think this was one of the first classic films I watched.
Right.
And I remember being quite impressed with myself that I liked it at the time.
Sat through it all.
Yeah. I think it might have been the first Jack Nicholson film I ever saw.
Wow. Before Batman?
Yeah, where he wasn't like a psychopath clown, obviously.
Right, I was going to say, right.
Yeah. I was actually way more familiar with Louise Fletcher, as she famously plays the Bajoran religious leader Kai Wynn in Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Oh, she does, Deep Space Nine, yeah.
Famously.
Yes, I did, yeah. I mean, now you mention it, yeah.
But yeah, I did like the film a lot, and Nicholson, Miloš Forman for the first time. A film with a huge reputation in American cinema. Lots of laughs, and there are some great behind-the-scenes stories as well. All of that to come. So yeah, I think this should be fun.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And Matt, what about yourself and OF4TCN? Those are the right letters, don't worry.
Okay, right. We're not doing no criminal Cold Men, right? Okay, I was a bit confused there.
Losing his mind already,
Yeah,
isn't he?
Jesus Christ. It's a key film, this one for me. Well, at least because it was the first film I ever lent Westy on videotape back in the day.
That's right.
You got it back yet?
No, he still got it. But also, like you, John, when I was growing up getting in films, reading books, magazine articles, what are the greatest films of all time? This one was always mentioned, so I was always really keen to see it. And when I did, it just felt like my eyes had been opened, like I got it straight away. and it's really cinematic. It's not one of those classics where you feel you have to study it as you watch it, and it's a bit like reading a chapter in a textbook as you go along, explain, oh, this is why it's great. You live with this film as you watch it and you feel it, and it's always stayed with me right since that first viewing. So yeah, big performances, big themes to get into, and a big fish on that doctor's photo.
Yeah, didn't weigh the chain, did you, Doc?
So One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was produced by Fantasy Films, distributed by United Artists, and released on November the 19th, 1975. Filmed in Salem, Oregon, and on the North Oregon coast, it was directed by Miloš Forman, adapted by Lawrence Hauben and Bo Goldman from Ken Kesey's novel of the same name, and it stars Jack Nicholson as R.P. McMurphy, Louise Fletcher as Nurse Ratched, and a host of other names as various inmates at the institution. Mm-hmm. We'll get to them as well.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
Let's do it then, should we?
Yes.
Let's go.
Let's fly.
Okay. Here we go. We're getting on the bus to talk the opening act of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
The beginning.
The film starts where it stays for most of its runtime, inside the state mental hospital. The world is explored from the word go, and we're getting into some key scenes that do that too. The baseball and basketball sports days are coming, but before that, we're talking some character introductions.
Yes, we are.
So we begin in autumn 1963. Convicted of statutory rape, Randall Patrick McMurphy is declared insane and committed to an institution. In the opening to the film, we meet McMurphy, our protagonist, as well as the rest of the inmates, our supporting characters, and Nurse Ratched, our villain.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, the goddamn marvel of modern science that you are, how's the opening for you?
If I had $1 for every time I've been called that, John, can't tell you.
You'd have $1
But I'd be very proud of that $1. I think it starts wonderfully, and I'm going to start with McMurphy going to see Dr. Spivey in the little chat they have in his office, because
Nice.
I think it's a wonderful setup for the character and with what's going to come. McMurphy straight away laying on the charm here, isn't he? You know, what a pleasure it is to meet you. It's like he's in there for a job interview, you know, doing anything but talk about why he's actually there, you know, more interested in the photo of the fish than anything else. But it tells you what this existence is going to be like for McMurphy, because this whole charm offensive just washes over Spivey. He doesn't care one little bit. Like, I absolutely love that bit when McMurphy thumps the desk like he's squashing a bug, and Spivey just gives him this look like, right, okay, I'll ignore that and just carry on. Really funny look.
Yeah, not his first rodeo, is it?
Oh, not by any chance. And it's a really telling insight into McMurphy's character, because as soon as they get into the reason he's there, it's just excuses. Oh, well, I guess I fight and I fuck too much. Comparing himself to Rocky Marciano, who's had a few fights. And then when he starts trying to excuse his crime, the reason he's there, oh, she said she was 18, and he starts talking about the Red Beaver. Like, the expression on Spivey's face.
It's awful.
Awful. Like, it doesn't change, but you can tell what he's thinking. But still, for McMurphy, it's all a game, that big grin at the end. You know, I think we ought to get to the bottom of R.P. and McMurphy. He thinks it's all just a big laugh, and he's going to breeze through this whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I take from this scene. Firstly, it becomes apparent very quickly, where in another time, it gets mentioned that McMurphy was convicted of statutory rape, like you said, Matt, a horrendous thing. But it comes across fairly clear to me that the film thinks it isn't that big a deal.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it might even wants to feel a bit sorry for McMurphy. I know that in the original book, the girl in question was only about 9, but statutory rape is still very bad.
Yeah.
That's 1975 for you, I guess. Also, though, Dr. Spivey was played by Dr. Dean R. Brooks, a real doctor and physician. And Forman used that to his advantage, because Brooks said that when they shot this scene, Forman gave him and Jack Nicholson 6 points to cover and said, I don't care how you get there, just cover those 6 points.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Which is like Kirby Enthusiasm. I think that's how they film as well.
It is.
Should have got Larry David in there. And just watching that scene, I think it's pretty clear the scene's mostly improvised.
Yeah.
Like when McMurphy's looking at the fishing photo and he's like, you didn't weigh the chain, did you, Doc?
Yeah.
And when he goes, do I look like that kind of guy to you, Doc? And sticks his tongue out.
Yeah.
Blatant ad-libs by Nicholson, I think. But good opening. Sets up the Mac, as I'm going to call him.
Okay.
And also the spontaneous feel of the dialogue that carries on and establishes the kind of laid-back pacing that Forman brings to the film.
Yeah, I mean, you can totally tell he's a real doctor. I think it really adds to it, adds to the weight of it. I think every time he's on screen, you can tell he's just got this bravado about him, I guess, this real knowledge that kind of shines through. And I think it's really necessary to have that, especially with the ad-lib of Nicholson. He kind of keeps him grounded, which is really good. But the bit that gets me in the opening of the film is the first group session where everybody's together.
Yeah.
And you're starting to understand every character and the way that this is framed. And I think it's just so wonderful to watch, but at the same time, it's so painful. I mean, Harden, who's played by William Redfield, is wonderful here. Everyone's wonderful here. I mean, Cheswick's wonderful here.
Charlie Cheswick.
When he's talking about his wife and the responsibilities that he's got and how he's just breaking down over it and nobody's offering him any support whatsoever. Nobody wants to talk first. Nobody wants to get involved. And I think Mac's looking at the group and he's going, I can have everybody here. I can manipulate everybody. Yeah. He's laughing. He's looking around. He's thinking, this is going to be so easy.
Yeah.
And, you know, that little Mary-Ann, and like, he just reacts to that. And he just does that. He's laughing. And you just tell, like, is this actually scripted, or is the camera just on these guys just doing what they do best? And I think it's just wonderful. And when Cheswick just offers it, I just want to help. And he's like, just shut up. I said, I just want to help. Yeah. And that breaks my fucking heart.
Please.
Yeah, please. No. And it's just, it's so heartbreaking when he's just quiet. And then it's just when Bancini comes in and just like, I'm tired. I'm tired.
Always tired, him, isn't he?
Yeah, it's amazing. But it's when when Ratchet talks to Harden and she's like, so why do you suspect her? And there's just that real slow push. I mean, Miloš Forman does this a lot. And there's that slow push on Ratchet, and you just know she means business. And that's the introduction to that character. It's so, so good. In a way, it just ends on her just staring at McMurphy, just looking at him, sizing him up, knowing what's going to happen. I think it's a wonderful introduction to the whole group and a wonderful introduction to the actual place where we're going to be spending all of this time. And it is painful to watch, but at the same time, really funny, really pleasurable, and just an excellent, excellent setup.
Yeah, I agree. It is our introduction to the inmates and also the group therapy sessions, which are a recurring beat of the movie, and they're always engaging. Yeah. There's a few sessions in the film, but I like how each one tends to revolve mostly around one or two of the patients. And this one, like you said, Westy, is definitely Harding's moment. Yeah. I'm talking about farm. Well. I'm talking about content. I'm talking about God, the devil, hell, heaven.
Do you get that? Finally.
For anyone listening, that is exactly what Matt was like when he first joined the podcast.
Yes, there was. I had to be edited down somewhat since then.
Yeah. I wouldn't shut up. I just want to help, man. Please.
And this is also our first real insight into Nurse Ratchet as she leads a session, the Ratch. She doesn't say a lot, but after it's all descended into chaos, the scene ends with, like you mentioned, Ratchet giving McMurphy that really cold stare. He gets a few of them as the film goes on.
Yeah, he does. He definitely does.
Yeah, and just to go back to Harding, as was said, played by William Redfield, and he is really good in this. So if anyone's wondering why they never saw him in anything after, it's because he died only the year after, 1976.
He did, yeah.
Really sad. He had leukemia, and he was actually diagnosed on set by Dana Brooks.
Yeah. Good job he was there. So he was ill throughout filming. Yeah. William Redfield.
Yeah.
Not that it shows, I think he's really good.
No, I don't think it shows at all.
Yeah, I think once you know, I think there's a few bits where you kind of, he does look a little bit weaker than he should.
Right.
Obviously still smoking through the whole thing.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
But another of the actors had some medical problems on the set too. Sidney Lassick, who plays Cheswick, the guy who wants his cigarettes. Right. He apparently got so heavily into the character that people on the set became concerned. In filming the final scene where the chief euthanizes McMurphy, Cheswick's lying in bed nearby, but Lassick became so overwhelmed by the whole scene that he had to be taken off the set.
Wow.
Yeah, he had a breakdown, didn't he?
Yeah, and the doctor said to Forman, if things get out of control, don't worry, we've got the right medication. Like what? The electroshock stuff? Unbelievable.
You can see it even from that, you know, the scene that I'm talking about when she just mentioned Mr. Cheswick, and he's like, me?
Yeah.
It's a really powerful performance.
It's huge.
It sticks really in my head all the way through. Yeah. We're talking about Nicholson improvising the scene in Spivvy's office there earlier on, and he did some ad-libbing before that. The moment when we're seeing McMurphy being brought into the hospital by the guards, the script said that McMurphy had to kiss the prison guard. Nicholson did that, but then Forman told him on the next take to kiss the other guard, so he was surprised, and you can definitely see that in the film. It's hilarious.
Yeah, another moment that definitely seems improvised to me is when McMurphy's refusing to take his pills from Nurse Pilbo, and Harding's standing there right next to him, grinning in his face, and McMurphy reacts to it and calls him Hard On, worst nickname ever. But that's surely improvised between those two at the time, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
brilliant how she's called Pilbo and hands out all the pills.
Yeah.
Pilbo Baggins.
She is quite small, so
She is tiny.
so that's the opening and our main characters, and it seems the lunatics might be running the asylum.
Yep.
From there, we spend more time with the inmate as we get into the day-to-day of life in the institute. Lots of sports, isn't there?
Yeah. Big fan of sports, me. Only in films like this, though, not real sports.
In these scenes, we see the friction between McMurphy and Ratchet escalate, a fake baseball game and a very real basketball game.
Yep.
Take us out to the ball games, Westy.
Oh, this scene where Mac is trying to get that baseball game on and Nurse Ratchet is not letting him do it. It's 10-9. It's 9-9. The session's over. Fuck. Yeah. And he's just going around and he's just trying to get everybody convinced. And when he's like, oh, say, can you see? The ball game. Come on, they're dancing around with people. Come on, Chief. The Chief put his hand up. The Chief put his hand up. And you're like, yes, great. And he just sits down with such a temper when he sits in that seat. Like a proper kid with a little paddy. It's absolutely amazing. And just the way it's so heartwarming, this scene. I absolutely love it. I can watch it over and over again. What a performance from Nicholson this is. If this was just like the central performance of the whole film, I think he still would have got the Oscar for it. It's absolutely incredible. Just the way that he does it, the way he sets it up. And he's like, Koufax kicks, he delivers.
Yeah.
And they take them to win martini, and everyone else just comes around the corner and they're looking at the TV and they're like, what the fuck? What the fuck's he do? Is he fucking crazy? And they're just like getting into it. And he's like, it's out like a fucking firecracker. And it's going, it's gone. And everyone's like, yeah, has it? What are you talking about? Jimmy's the only one who can see this, but it's when he's like, get me a fucking wiener before I die.
I love that bit.
Incredible line. It's the most beautiful act of like peaceful rebellion I've seen in film. It's so wonderful. It's got to be up there in like top 3 scenes of that nature where it's just, we're going to do what we want and we're going to absolutely steal it. It's just wonderful how Ratchet doesn't have control. McMurphy has control, and he has control just by imagining this place and taking them somewhere else just through pure imagination. I think it's absolutely magic.
Yeah, the whole sequence is 10 minutes of Jack Nicholson being unbelievably charismatic.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't even know the rules of baseball, but I understand that game.
It's exciting. Yeah. What stands out to me is just the vindictiveness of Ratchet. In that first vote, she says to Matt Murphy, get a majority and we can watch the game, knowing fine well that even if everyone in the group votes yes, it's still not enough, which is outrageous.
Yeah.
And then when McMurphy mimes the match, that to me is Nicholson at his best. Huge personality, charisma, the things he does as well as anyone. But also, looking at it through today's lens, tiny little telly. Not seeing anything on that.
It's a minuscule, isn't it? Yeah.
It's like 5 inches.
Still sees reflection in it, though. That's important.
But yeah, one of the most memorable moments in the film for me. And it's
easily.
All about Nicholson as well.
So the radio broadcast we hear of the baseball game was a real match. It was Game 2 of the 1963 World Series, the LA Dodgers versus the New York Yankees. That's
Classic.
Basically the only reference the film gives to what year it's set in, which is brilliant.
Very nice. I thought you were going to say that's the only baseball reference you'll ever hear from me.
Definitely is. Until we talk about Major League, but that's another thing.
Yeah, and the commentator as well on that clip might be known to our American listeners. He's a Hall of Fame baseball announcer called Ernie Harwell.
Okay.
Our equivalent, I guess, would be like John Watson or someone.
Big sheepskin coat. Well, I'm going to go from the baseball to the basketball game because when Mac tries to get the patients to play basketball, it's so good. It's so important to the film because, for one thing, it's funny. And I do think the film lulls you into a false sense of insecurity at this point. Like, it's going to be this kind of gentle, heartwarming tale of this guy inspiring these patients.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of really good physical comedy here. You know, McMurphy on top of Bancini, waggling his arse about to get in a move. That's brilliant. That's really funny. And it's interesting because at first glance you think, he's helping them. They're getting some exercise. They're getting the first lesson in how to think for themselves, what they're going to do with the ball, but also lessons about teamwork. It's surely better than just sitting in the same semicircle in therapy day after day after day. But the interesting thing for me is Mac is still doing it for selfish reasons. You know, he's bored, he wants something to do. And if he's going to have to move these guys around to do it, then that's what he's going to do. And it's also the root of his relationship with the chief. You know, he doesn't give up on him just because he gets no response. He persists even when Washington tells him, look, you're not getting through to him.
Yeah.
And I think in retrospect, you can probably see Chief here trying to work out McMurphy for himself as well. You know, is this guy a loon? Is he for real? Is he actually smart? And I love how Keeps cutting back to Ratchet, just observing in that building, like
from the window,
the opposite side, from the window.
That push in again on Ratchet.
That push in again.
Really Kubrick.
Really Kubrick, watching what's going on.
Yeah.
You know, is this guy going to be a problem? What am I up against here? Probably thinking a lot of the same things Chief is actually. You know, what is up with this guy? Is he real or fake? Yeah, I really like this scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, the basketball match, it's the funniest scene in the film. One of the funniest scenes in any film for me.
Yeah.
It's McMurphy's exasperation at playing with the inmates. Nicholson is so funny. When he passes to Martini, and Martini just throws the ball straight out to play. McMurphy's like, you threw the ball into the goddamn fence. There's nobody there. We're playing ball. Brilliant. But I love the setup scene to this as well, where we see McMurphy teaching the chief and Bancini how to play basketball.
Yeah.
One of the most important beats of the film, McMurphy teaching the patients and kind of enriching them. And again, it's funny. Again, Nicholson is so charismatic, where he's like, I got the moves. Hit me, chief. Hit me, baby.
Yeah.
Brilliant. But then the humour's undermined straight away when we get that cut to that shot of Ratchet at the window, surveying what's going on. If ever there was a shot in a movie that makes you go, that's the villain then, it's that one.
Yeah. That surveillance kind of look. The actual match, though, how happy is Chief when he's just running up and down the court?
He's delighted.
Oh, my God. I just want to sob when I'm watching it. He's just so fucking happy, man. I love it.
Yeah, and then in this scene you have Joseph Ellick, and he's the actor who plays Bancini. And he said Nicholson actually improvised the whole thing about climbing onto his shoulders. And then Ellick, in return, he improvised the walking away and coming back, which is really funny.
That is really funny. He's like, over there. And he's like shuffling around.
Yeah, apparently Nicholson said to Joseph Ellick, if I fall, they'll close the picture down for a week. And Ellick said, if I fall, they'll close it down for 2 weeks.
Nice.
I wouldn't hold your breath on that. To be honest, Joseph doesn't even say anything. And that is the beginning of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. An intense setting, intense characters, and the setup of the relationship between the Mac and the Ratch. Pretty intense.
Pretty intense, but let's get more intense. Why not?
Yeah.
The director.
The director of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was Czech-born filmmaker Miloš Forman. He directed 5 films before Cuckoo's Nest: Czech Productions, Black Peter, Audition, Loves of a Blonde, and The Fireman's Ball, and the 1971 American comedy Taking Off.
Yeah.
Not exactly a household name at the time then, Matt.
Nope.
How did Miloš Forman do as director of OF4 TCN?
Is that definitely right?
Still the right letters.
It's still right? Okay, right. I mean, this is proper grown-up direction, isn't it? You know, this is the work of someone who's patient and not afraid of being subtle, because he knows that's what the story needs. And I think a lesser director or someone who didn't get the story, I think they might try to like impose their personality on the film too much, but to its detriment. So the therapy scenes, you know, someone might try to do a big like tracking shot around the circle, because the camera has to move more.
Yeah.
Or when the patients are speaking, they'll go from one to another in a one. But Foreman doesn't bring any of that because he knows it's not right. So what he does is very simple. It's very mid-shot, group shot, 2-shot. Even when he goes for close-up, it's not bam. He doesn't punch in like Leone does in his films.
Well, thankfully.
Imagine.
On Ratchet.
Scariest thing ever. It's all very careful and considered. And because that, he brings, I think, a huge amount of realism to this, and he grounds it. And, you know, I'm not going as far as saying it's like a docudrama. It doesn't have that kind of element to it, but it all feels very truthful in terms of the emotion, in terms of the narrative. So when you do get the big moments, like McMurphy narrating the baseball game, or when he kicks off later at everyone for being voluntary, that don't feel too big, that don't feel like Hollywood moments, that feel like they've grown naturally out of the character and out of the narrative. And I think in a lesser film, those moments would just not fit in, or they'd be too OTT. And I don't think this film ever feels like a Hollywood film. And I think that's because of the realism that Foreman brings to it.
Yeah, agreed.
One of the most surprising things is maybe how little experience Miloš Forman had in Hollywood, just one film. Like I mentioned, he did have 4 Czech films under his belt, and maybe it isn't so much of a surprise because I think there's a definite European film influence in Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah, definitely.
First off, in its edge, Forman doesn't shy away from taking us to dark places. The first time McMurphy goes through the electroconvulsive therapy and we see it, that is brutal. I always imagine how that might feel.
Yeah.
I mean, Nicholson delivers it brilliantly, but it's Forman's vision for it as well. Yeah. Also, there's a very laid-back, naturalistic pacing that reminds me of European films. Like during the party at the end, where Billy hooks up with Candy, they both go off into the room, and then the camera just kind of sits on McMurphy doing nothing for about 30 seconds. Yeah. Forman's not intimidated by just having one image fill the screen for a time. He would let the cameras roll as well when they weren't shooting, but not tell the actors, so he could capture real emotions. And the shot when McMurphy comes back from shock therapy and Ratchet gives him like an icy glare, that apparently was actually Louise Fletcher reacting to something that Forman had said to her that she didn't like.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, wow. So don't mess with Louise Fletcher.
Not at all.
Absolutely not.
And also Forman himself said that as somebody born in Czechoslovakia in like 1932, he saw the whole idea of being locked in a mental hospital as an allegory for the Communist Party that he worked under as a young man.
Yeah,
right.
The Communist Party was my big nurse, he said. And I think when you know that, you can see it, because the film definitely explores the idea of like identity and that being stripped away from people. So excellent direction. I like how you can see Forman's identity as a European and specifically a Czechoslovakian all through the film. I would say it's no Amadeus. Forman's other classic for me.
What is?
What is?
I love that one, yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
It is a great film, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what you guys have said, especially what you said, John, with that European influence. It's very, very evident. And I love the fact that he gives the identity to the group as opposed to the individuals. We don't really have much backstory. We don't quite know what's wrong with half of the people apart from Harden. We get his backstory with his wife, and he's obviously, a repressed homosexual, and he has no idea that he is. And it's just, he's struggling with that. And I suppose in the 70s, that's something that's very, very difficult to come to terms with, because it's not something that was welcomed. So, it is something that he is going to put himself in an institution for, because he just feels confused. Why doesn't he love his wife? Why am I not normal? Inverted commas. So I think that's the only kind of backstory that we'll get to that.
Outing Harding.
Yeah, well, how man. That's not a big push, is it? It's hardly like Damon in The Departed, which I did as well. I'm full of them. It's just the way that, like Matt said, Matt touched on, it's the way he frames this, and this, because this came from a theatre production, it does feel like it has that kind of approach, especially the group shots. If you watch how the group shots are filmed, it is the full group, and then when somebody speaks, it is a mid-shot on that person. It's a single. It's bang, this person, bang, that person. He very rarely goes to a 2-shot unless they both are interacting with each other or both interacting with the scene. And I very much doubt he had, 7 cameras. So he's going to know what he's going to put and where he's going to put it. He shows you everything, like you said, John. He shows you, he opens the door and lets you in.
Yeah.
And he's absolutely fearless. The direction in this is honest. It gives all the actors room to perform, to find the characters, and it's fearless. Absolutely brilliant.
So Ken Kesey's novel was published in 1962, and behind the scenes there was a very famous Hollywood family played a major part in bringing One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest to the screen.
Yeah.
You know the family I mean?
Well, there was a period in the 80s cinema where he got so horny he ruined his life over So if that doesn't give you a clue.
Yeah, Douglas's.
So Kirk Douglas loved the book and bought the film rights when it was first released. He starred in the Broadway production of Cuckoo's Nest as McMurphy, but struggled to get it bought by a studio. Douglas had actually met Miloš Forman in Prague in the 60s and told him that he'd send him the book as he thought he'd be a good fit to direct. The book never arrived, though, because it was presumably confiscated by the Czech government.
Yeah.
Forman thought Douglas hadn't sent the book. Douglas thought Forman had just ignored him, and they were both furious for years. I can easily imagine Kirk Douglas and Miloš Forman holding a lifelong grudge over a misunderstanding, to be honest.
Yeah, just refusing to be in the same room for like 5 years. I am Spartacus. No, I'm Spartacus.
Yeah, and I know years later, Kirk Douglas was going to sell the rights for Cuckoo's Nest because he just couldn't get it made. But then Michael Douglas, his son, obviously said, well, let me run with it. And he got Saul Zaentz to co-op deals for $2 million. At that point, Hal Ashby, who before this had made Howl and Maude, he was in the running to direct. But by coincidence, the writer that hired at this point, who was a guy called Lawrence Hoban, he recommended Miloš Forman instead. And then when they met Forman Foreman actually went through the script line by line, describing what he'd do.
Of course he did.
And that's the reason Douglas hired him.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, you can tell that.
9-hour meeting.
Yeah. Didn't Foreman say he was just hired because he was in their price range? He was a really humble man.
Well, Douglas said it was the fireman's ball that convinced him that Foreman was the guy, because that film featured a load of characters in like an enclosed situation as well.
Right.
And Douglas also said that at the time, Foreman was living in the Chelsea Hotel in New York as a recluse. And he had a friend with him who would act as a go-between between Foreman and a psychiatrist and relay information, like a piggy in the middle.
Right.
So it sounds like he was kind of living the film for real.
Yeah, living the fucking dream. I'd love that. Foreman had the cast prepare for filming a lot. During casting, he auditioned actors by putting them in group therapy sessions and had them improvise. Apparently, part of the reason Sidney Lassick won the part of Cheswick was because he turned up wearing a rope as a belt, which was probably normal, I think, for Sidney Lassick.
Yeah. Sounds like a good look, to be fair.
It sounds great. Yeah, Jack Sparrow.
Then before filming, Foreman screened the Titty Cut Follies to the cast, which was a documentary from the 60s about the inmates of Bridgewater State Hospital who had been declared criminally insane. And Foreman said that film had a fascination with faces that inspired him in Cuckoo's Nest.
Right.
I mean, there's some right faces in Cuckoo's Nest, to be fair.
Yeah,
right.
I know. Right. The hills do have eyes.
Yeah.
Well, he's in there.
He is in there.
Yeah. And I know that Foreman, he also wanted to shoot on location in a real hospital. And Douglas did try to arrange that, but he said that because the story depicts mental health treatment in a pretty poor light, everyone he spoke to just turned him down. But then he spoke to Dr. Dana Brooks, who we've already talked about.
Yeah.
And at the time, he was the director of the Oregon State Hospital. And he said, yeah, you can film here as long as my patients can be in the film, because Brooks thought it would be like an extension of their therapy. And that's what say he plays Dr. Spivey. And another doctor, Prasanna K. Patti, is in the film as Dr. Sanji as well.
Right.
Yeah. So you can film here as long as my patients can be in the film, I can be in the film, and my mate can be in the film.
Yeah.
Outrageous.
That's not going to be a problem, is it? What extras do you want?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Douglas employed 85 patients on the film. They didn't know at the time, but many of them were criminally insane. And one guy was the biggest arsonist in Oregon.
You're going to say arsehole?
And they put that guy in the art department and gave him the job of wiping down the 10K lamps with 5 gallons of kerosene. I mean, what could possibly go wrong?
What? Amazing. That is literally the worst job ever for him.
An absolute circus.
Just in charge of lighting cigarettes. So Foreman and Dean Drooks identified one real patient for each of the cast members to shadow in the hospital, just to get a feel for what their life was like. Yeah, and he had Jack Nicholson and Louise Fletcher watch real electroshock therapy sessions. Some of the cast members slept on the ward, and Foreman apparently lived there for a month before filming. So they all slept, you know, where they drag Billy up and there's that big corridor where Nurse Ratched walks in and all the cells on either side. Like all the actors slept in them cells.
Wow. Foreman would have fit in like a glove. Disappeared in the background.
Just still thinking it's the Chelsea Hotel.
There was also an abandoned underground railway under Oregon State Hospital, and in those old tunnels they kept the ashes of former hospital patients that had gone unclaimed after they died, which is sad.
That's grim, yeah.
But the cast went through those patients' belongings and took some things for the film. So, every cloud.
Wasn't a total waste.
Yeah.
So the record book that Ratched carries around with her all the time, Louise Fletcher took that from the Underground Railway.
Wow.
And also during filming, a crew member had left a second-story window open at the hospital, and an actual patient climbed through, but fell and injured himself. So the next day, the Statesman Journal newspaper in Oregon had the front page headline, "One flew out of the cuckoo's nest."
Very good. Very clever. The pun down.
Yeah.
Got to be across your puns if you're working in print.
Of course.
He nearly died, but at least he got a good pun out of it. And the production designer was called Paul Silbert, and he described filming as bedlam, like a 19th century madhouse. At one point, apparently, some of the real patients were pulled out of their wheelchairs and dragged across the floor, and Dean Brooks ran in shouting, "This has all got to stop! This has got to stop!"
Oh, no.
But get me in there, though.
Yeah.
Don't come my sins.
Just the right side. Miloš, are you rolling on that? Yeah.
For his work on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Miloš Forman won Best Director at the Oscars, and the film itself won Best Picture.
Yeah.
To say there was some competition that year is an understatement. The Best Picture nominees alongside Cuckoo's Nest were Barry Lyndon, Dog Day Afternoon, Nashville, and Jaws.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oof.
3 out of 4 in bad.
And Best Director nominees that year were Forman, Federico Fellini, Sidney Lumet, Robert Altman, and Stanley Kubrick.
Wow, yeah.
When Spielberg's not getting nominated for Jaws, you know there's been some serious directing done that year.
That's from the big boys.
They weren't ready for it yet, I don't think.
No.
It was Forman who came out on top, though, and great work from him on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh, astonishing stuff.
Unparalleled, never been matched, I don't think.
The cast.
Miloš Forman was largely unknown as a filmmaker in 1975, and that can be said about all but one of the cast too.
Yeah.
A big ensemble cast, and we're going to talk about several, including the inmates and Nurse Ratched, but we're starting with that big name.
We are.
So Jack Nicholson plays Randall Patrick R.P. McMurphy. Sent to the mental institution after pleading insanity when convicted of statutory rape, McMurphy locks horns with Nurse Ratched, resulting in his lobotomization and mercy killing at the hands of the chief, but not before becoming a saviour and father figure to the hospital inmates. Let's hear it for Bull Goose Randall, Westy.
Let's hear it. Why not?
How's McMurphy and Jack Nicholson?
How's Jack Nicholson in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? I mean, that's not even a question, is it? It's just, it's more like, how good is Jack Nicholson in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? That's it. And the range of him and what he brings to this is just absolutely ridiculous. It's so powerful. He's just so engrossed in it, and you're so engrossed in it. I mean, we said at the top what he's in for: statutory rape. You're supposed to hate this guy immediately, but you don't. And he keeps going, and he takes them out, and he, takes them fishing, and you're supposed to hate, but you don't. He abuses women. He's got prostitutes. You're supposed to hate him, and you don't. Who else could pull this off with that much charisma and that much range, apart from Jack Nicholson in 1975?
Maybe nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody that I can think of could perform this well. And he's got this real depth to him, a real emotional center, this real believable core. The range that he's got, and he hits everything. It's like an opera singer just hitting the high notes and then hitting bass at the same time. You just know for a fact he's just so watchable, so engaging. It's just, it's up there with kind of Brando-esque kind of performance for me. It's absolute masterclass. I cannot say any more about it than it's just absolutely flawless.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. He's one of the biggest Hollywood names ever. And he's not one of my favourite actors or anything, Jack Nicholson, but his brilliance is beyond question.
Absolutely.
3-time Oscar winner, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is the best he's ever been for me.
Yeah.
The film has a great setting in the hospital. There's a brilliant supporting set of characters as well, but I think it's a dynamic between McMurphy and Ratched that powers the film. I saw an interview with Nicholson where he said he always tries to find an angle with his characters, like a unique way to approach it. And his angle with McMurphy was that he thinks he's irresistible to women, and that's his big flaw. Yeah. And we see that all through the film, because McMurphy's charming. He charms the bird out of everyone's trees, the patients, the orderlies, the audience, but Ratched doesn't bat an eyelid. No. Nicholson said that Cuckoo's Nest is basically one long, unsuccessful seduction between him and Ratched. I mean, we've all been blown out, but this is ridiculous.
I've never had to strangle someone at the end of it.
No. And that role, the charismatic, lovable scamp who's got light and shade to him, it's like it was written for Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Maybe the definitive Nicholson performance, and for me, definitely his best.
Yeah, I mean, just in general, 70s Jack Nicholson is where it's at for me. I think once you get past The Shining, which I really love, but then into the 80s and 90s, I'll just lose interest a bit in him. And, he's always entertaining, but he gets a bit hammy, he gets a bit lazy. It's always Jack turning up with his sunglasses on to do his Jack thing. In the 2000s, he gets much more interesting in stuff like About Schmidt. But this is his peak, I think. Just an absolute charisma volcano, just lights up the screen every second. The camera loves him. The characters, apart from Ratched, love him. And he brings everything that's great about him as an actor. His energy is like unlike anyone else. His magnetism, and that's so important because, as Westy says, we should hate McMurphy.
Yeah.
He is abhorrent. And nothing he does in this film suggests he's a saint. Some of the things he does are really, really selfish. And, we'll get into that.
I think everything he does is selfish.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, sometimes he's right in what he says and not denying he does some good for these people, but he isn't there for this horrible reason. And if it wasn't for how good Nicholson is, I don't know how much we would stick with him as a character.
Well, Jack Nicholson wasn't the only name linked with McMurphy. Depending on what you read, all sorts of names were considered. Steve McQueen, James Caan, John Voight, Marlon Brando. I mean, Brando would have been outrageous.
It would have been ridiculous.
Huge. The patients would have been the regular guys next to Brando.
Yeah, just rubbing his head, just talking about the end of the world.
Yeah.
Just in shadow all the time.
Yeah. And according to Burt Reynolds, Forman offered him the part of McMurphy over breakfast, but it never went anywhere.
Right.
Huge tash in there for McMurphy.
He
Big
would have
rub.
been funny though, Reynolds.
Oh, hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that when, as I said earlier, Hal Ashby was in talks to direct it, it was him that had first mentioned Nicholson for the role, which Michael Douglas once was mentioned. Apparently he never forgot. And Forman had also liked the idea, but problem was Nicholson wasn't available for another 6 months, so they used that time to assemble the cast to complement him instead.
Yeah, well, that worked out pretty well, I think, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Everyone's brilliant, yeah.
One person who wasn't impressed, though, was the creator, Ken Kesey. He said that Nicholson was totally wrong for the part and that he thought a better fit was Gene Hackman.
Right.
Can you see that?
I can see where he's coming from, but I couldn't see it all. I mean, maybe for one scene, but to hold the whole film up all the way through, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Hackman's brilliant and I love him, but I can't quite get there with McMurphy with him.
Hackman would have ripped that sink up, no problem.
Easy. During filming, Michael Douglas lived in a rented house next to Nicholson and said that Nicholson might have a reputation for not giving a shit and it all coming so easy to him, but that's not true. He said he would hear him rehearsing every single night, and Forman said he is the most prepared, considerate, generous actor. Perfect. I don't know this day if he's crazy or not. I still have no idea. But it's like, well, that's the whole point, isn't it?
Yeah. When Miloš Forman's calling you crazy, you might be a bit crazy.
Yeah. Or just a very, very, very good actor.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is, Forman calls Nicholson perfect now, but famously, they didn't get on at all during filming.
Wow.
Forman initially thought the watch should be chaos when McMurphy arrives, but Nicholson took the opposite approach, said, well, no, it should be calm, otherwise I'm going to have no effect on the other patients.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, on the first day of filming, Nicholson turned up sporting a huge bushy beard, as he thought it suited the character.
Like mine.
Matt's turned up wearing a huge bushy beard today as well.
Big bushy beard.
And Forman told him to shave it off immediately. So they got off on the wrong foot straight away.
Oh, dear. Yeah.
That point there, though, about them arguing or discussing whether it should be mental or it should be calm when they go into the place. Surely that's in the script, right? Surely that's
You would have
decided
thought so.
before they start filming. Surely. Like, come on.
Not in this case.
What's it like in there? I don't know. They're all fucking crazy. All right, fair
Making
enough.
everything up.
There's 85 of them. Just hide them out the wheelchairs.
And I also know that during filming, Forman wouldn't let the actors see the dailies, so nobody was sure how their performance was looking or coming across.
Just for no reason. Can't say them.
Just for no reason. So apparently Michael Douglas said because of that, the cast in general started to lose the faith in Forman, and apparently Nicholson was so furious about it, he'd only communicate to Forman through the DP, Haskell Wexler.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Michael Douglas said that was part of the reason that Haskell Wexler was fired, because he was stirring the pot with the other actors. So
Right.
we've got a bit more on that later on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jack Nicholson had been a losing Oscar nominee 4 times before, but that all changed with Cuckoo's Nest. And for his performance as McMurphy, he won Best Actor.
He did.
A deserved win, do you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
100%.
Easily. One of the best wins ever, I would say.
So great work from Jack Nicholson, one of the most famous lead performances in Hollywood.
Incredible.
Definitely.
Incredible.
The immovable object to McMurphy's irresistible force is Nurse Mildred Ratchard, played by Louise Fletcher.
Yep.
The dominant figure at the Institute, Ratchard is a cold, ruthless tyrant who rules with an iron fist, ultimately having McMurphy lobotomized at the climax.
Yeah.
She's something of a ain't she, Matt?
Yeah, that was left field.
Wow.
Yeah.
How is the Ratch and Louise Fletcher playing her?
I think she actually has the hardest job in this film because she has to be the complete opposite of Nicholson. He can go big. He's got dialogue that he can just devour. He can rant, he can rave, he can inspire everyone. She can't do any of that. She's got to be so calm, so precise, so quiet. Like, I don't think she raises her voice once in this film. And the thing is, she doesn't have to. She is so terrifying at times. All it needs is one gesture or one look. Like when McMurphy's in a therapy session and he's rippling that deck of cards and he's making that noise, she gives this little flinch, and the look of disdain she gives him speaks absolute volumes.
Yeah.
She doesn't need a word of dialogue to express what she's thinking there. And that must have been so hard for Louise Fletcher, because Forman has essentially said, Jack, go for it, go big, eat up the screen. Louise, don't do any of that.
Yeah.
And that must be terrifying to hear, because you just think, well, I'm just going to get steamrolled by Nicholson here. But she plays the contrast instead. You know, McMurphy can be like, rah, 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 100 miles an hour. Ratched doesn't waste a single word. And every word that comes out of Fletcher's mouth is so carefully measured for maximum impact. Like when McMurphy refuses his medication and she says, if Mr. McMurphy doesn't want to take his medication orally, I'm sure we can arrange that he can have it some other way.
Yeah.
But I don't think that he would like it. Like, terrifying. Like, okay, right, I'll take it orally. That's fine. Because she just has this presence, and you can tell she has so much sway and so much control over these people, which is why she's perfectly happy to put it to the vote to change the routine, because she knows she has the numbers and she knows they'll all still stand by her anyway. So yeah, this is just such a wonderful performance for me.
It absolutely is. I mean, she'd appeared in 3 features before Cuckoo's Nest, Louise Fletcher, but never as a lead. And the vast majority of her career had been on TV, which makes it all the more astonishing that she rolls into Oregon State Hospital and just knocks it out of the park.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
When you're talking fictional villains, one of the classic archetypes is the authoritarian. And we've had a lot in films. Warden Norton from Shawshank is very good. The May in Jaws is too. The Trunchbull from Matilda is great. And as much as I love seeing Bruce Bogtrotter stuffing his face with chocolate cake, and as much as I enjoy Maeve Vaughan's suits, Nurse Ratched is surely the classic authoritarian villain in movies.
Yeah.
From the first time we see her, that first group therapy session, she dominates the men. She asks the group to share, and none of them will even look her in the eye. We'll find out later, it's not because they're all so introverted or incapable of talking. It's because they're all scared of Ratched.
They're terrified, yeah.
That attitude is constant throughout the film, as is the way she looks. Her uniform is a key part of the character, and Ratched knows it. At the end, when she gets to the party, one of her first actions is to ask Martini to get a hat. When she's like, my cap.
Yeah.
She knows the power the uniform gives her.
Yeah.
A striking moment to me is when she walks into the ward after the party. There's no music, not even much of a reaction shot from the patients. But when we see Ratched come in, I always feel like dread. And that comes entirely from the previous 2 hours.
Yeah.
I do have more to say on Ratched because we'll have a Patreon question coming on her shortly. But for now, I mean, she's excellent. And Louise Fletcher is excellent playing her. Even better than Kai Wynn in Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Well, that's a high bar, John, isn't it?
Yeah, good.
Miles better, to be honest.
I was going to say, there must be some performance in Star Trek.
I have no intention of watching Deep Space Nine.
Quite fancy Nurse Ratched, anyway. And I don't know why.
The uniform?
I don't know. No, I'm not going to be that fucking shallow. No, it's a personality, guys.
A winning personality.
A winning personality. I don't know. What gets me with Louise Fletcher and her performance here is how much she just personifies the system, and we'll get into that as well, and how much she is basically all of the rules that everyone... She is the rule book, but it's the mystery she brings. Where does she go when she leaves work? Has she got a husband? Has she got a life?
I often think that,
I would imagine she's just got like uniforms hung up. There's a white bed, and there's just one seat, like Psycho, just in the middle of of this room that's completely white, and she's just eating cornflakes and waiting to go back to work. It's just it's what she brings to that. There's no warmth, and it's the way Miloš Forman knows that, and he does them push-ins at the same time where she does that look. That is a winning formula, and he uses it a couple of times, and every time he does, it's chilling, but pretty sexy.
Well, Michael Douglas said that 5 big stars turned the part of Ratched down before Louise Fletcher was asked because, he said, it wasn't fashionable to play a villain in the 70s.
Yeah,
I bet.
He's never named the 5 stars, but according to other sources, they were Jane Fonda, Shirley MacLaine, Faye Dunaway, Ellen Burstyn, and Audrey Hepburn.
Wow.
I mean, stars is right.
Dunaway would have been great,
Yeah, I think of all the possible casts we've ever done, Faye Dunaway's Nurse Ratched is the easiest to imagine ever.
Yeah,
she would have been brilliant.
Yeah, straight out of Chinatown.
And the thing is, Forman got to Fletcher because when he was casting the part of Candy, who's the prostitute later in the film, he was considering Shelley Duvall. And so as research, he watched a film she did called Thieves Like Us for research. And that did also saw Louise Fletcher, which is why he got her into audition. And he auditioned her again over 6 months, kept telling her she wasn't approaching her right, but kept calling her back anyway until he eventually did cast her.
Just slowly breaking her down, breaking her whole
Yeah.
human personality down until she comes in just sick.
Probably waiting for Dunaway to change her mind, which never happened.
Yeah.
I saw an interview with Louise Fletcher where she said she was delighted to get the gig, but had two big concerns. She never played a villain like Ratchet before, and she knew she was acting alongside Jack Nicholson, who has a huge presence on screen. But I mean, that contrast between the two, we've talked about it. It works brilliantly.
Yeah, great chemistry.
Nice, isn't it?
And Fletcher purposely wore no makeup in the film, just Vaseline on her lips, and she chose Ratchet's hairstyle herself. It's very 1940s to show how uptight and traditional she is, but it's also kind of devil horns as well at the same time, which I think's incredible.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And Fletcher said that Ratchet believes that what she's doing is for the good of the patients, but it's just she's just misguided and kind of drunk on the power, which I can see as well. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the hair Westy that does it for you.
Maybe. The whole package.
Well, I mean, Louise Fletcher herself certainly wasn't uptight. Near the end of production, she whipped off her dress in front of the rest of the cast and stood in front of them topless. She said, I was thinking, I'll show them I'm a real woman under here.
Yeah.
And then she got a photographer in, stood in her underwear again, and recreated the famous Betty Grable World War II pin-up poster where she's looking over her shoulder.
Brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then signed it Mildred and gave a copy to the cast and crew. Some saucy behaviour on the set.
Absolutely fantastic.
Wesley, I'd love that.
If I was born like 20 years earlier, I would have been that photographer. Breaking the door down.
And what's interesting is that in the book, Ratchet is never given a first name, but in the film, as we know, it's Mildred. And it was Louise Fletcher who came up with the name herself, and it came up because Nicholson had asked her, well, what's Ratchet's first name? And then the scene, when McMurphy returns from shock therapy and he calls her Mildred, that was an ad-lib by Nicholson, and Fletcher said it's a favourite moment in the film.
Nice.
Lovely that.
Yeah.
Mildred, though. No wonder she's such a square.
Yeah, absolutely ageless.
Perfect,
it's an ageless name, an ageless character. She could be like just 50 forever, or like however old she, and you just don't know, do you?
A benefit of being in All the Right Movies Patreon is that we'll answer your questions on the show. We have one of those now. It's on Nurse Ratchet, and it comes from one of our classic patrons. That's George Anderson.
Hello, George, mate.
Hello, George.
So George asks, does ATRM consider Nurse Ratchet a villain? She's no angel, but could a case be made that McMurphy should share the villain spotlight because of the mess he creates? Or is there truly a villain at all? 3 questions for the price of 1 from George.
Wow, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Matt?
I think it's a great question, and it's definitely the part of the film that I think I've done the biggest 180 on over the years, because when I first watched this, 18, 19, it's so easy to get caught up in Nicholson's performance, to be like, yeah, fuck the man, break the system.
Yeah.
But the more and more I come back to this, the more sympathy I do have for Ratchet. She is only trying to do her job the best she can. And make no mistake, McMurphy doesn't do half the things he does to help these people. He does them because he's bored and because he wants to wind her up. So a lot of what she does is a direct consequence of what he does. And yes, I agree, she is too much of a stickler for the rules, to say the least, probably drunk on power. But don't overlook that scene when she's the only one that says McMurphy should stay. Everyone else wants to send him away, make him a problem for someone else. She's the only one who says, no, we should keep him here. We should try to help him. Mm-hmm. So I think it's much more complex than just saying, oh, Ratchet's the villain, McMurphy's the hero. I think he should take equal blame for everything that transpires. And ultimately, she's only doing the job. So if you want the really pretentious answer, then I think the system is the villain.
Nice.
Wow. Well, we've got a bit of a disagreement here.
Oh.
Because I think there definitely is a villain, and it shouldn't be shared by McMurphy. As I see it, the villain is absolutely Nurse Ratchet.
Really?
Right. Okay.
I do get George's question, and we had a similar one from Jacob Perry too, and obviously Matt agrees to an extent. But I think the reason it's easy to question if Ratchet is the villain is because, and this is the brilliance of the character for me, it's all so subtle. Ratchet never physically hurts anyone. She rarely even raises her voice. But when you dig deeper, I think she's despicable. She uses the patients under her care as a foil to get what she wants. Like the baseball game we talked about, or when McMurphy wants to turn the music down. She clearly isn't bothered about the wants of the men, as she shows when the vote goes against her, and she doesn't change her mind. She just exploits them to control them. Then the doctors know McMurphy's faking it. They all say as much when we have the meeting about the fishing trip. Ratchet's there, so she knows there's nothing wrong with McMurphy, but still has to keep him on the ward. And unlike you, Matt, I don't think she just want to help him, because she doesn't even try to help him at all. She has him lobotomized. So for me, it was about revenge, not care.
Right.
And also, she has the orderly Washington dishing out beatings regularly. I mean, what sort of healthcare is that? The end after the party, the orderlies wake up the inmates really violently by roughing them up and banging them against the walls. I mean, these men are not well. They're very, very poorly, and they get treated like absolute shit in the one place that should be looked after, the hospital. And Ratched might not dish out the beatings herself, but she's entirely responsible for creating that poisonous environment. And she does it intentionally. And that, to me, is why she's the villain. And to be honest, I'm not done on that yet. I've got more coming on Ratched's villainy in the end section.
Okay, we'll go to this. We're definitely going to disagree at the end.
We are, I think, yeah. And Westy, it's 1-1 here, so...
Christ.
The vote is 1-1, Mr. West.
The peacemaker, as usual.
Clooney.
Yeah, I'm Clooney, yeah. It's 9-1, 9-9, 1-1. Here we go. Let's make it 2-1 somewhere. When I heard it was a question from George, I thought it was just going to be like, is she scarier than the shark in Jaws? But it's not that.
She is.
Well, yeah, I guess so. Like I said, when we're talking about Louise Fletcher and what she brings to the character, I think I'm kind of in the middle, which is really boring. I do think there's a system there, but bearing in mind this was based in 1963, nobody understood these conditions. Nobody really understood what was going on, and it will be a time where if you're in charge of this ward and all of these people's well-being, you don't know what to do. They could be doing anything at any point, go off it at any point. They choose violence, so you have to choose violence back. It's kind of the only way to do it before they can understand most of these conditions. And I don't really think she's trained enough for the role. I think she's taught to do things and told to do things and told to keep this in order in a place that doesn't have any order. And how else do you do that? Through narcissistic tendencies, which I guess anyone who's in that position would have them. Yes, she does go a little bit too far. Yes, she does push the patients a little bit too far, but at the same time, she doesn't know how far they can be pushed because the conditions weren't necessarily understood. And to answer the question, I do think that she is a villain, yes, but so is McMurphy. He's as much of a villain as she is in the real world. She's a villain in there, and he's a villain out there. So I think for what he's done, you're just bringing villains together in a world that is completely misunderstood, and I think that's the whole point of the film.
So there you have it. That's straight down the middle from us then, isn't it, I think?
Yeah. As much as I can be. Yeah.
Whichever one you agree
I didn't even change that. I didn't change anything. That was exactly what I had.
Well, for her performance as Nurse Ratched, Louise Fletcher also won an Oscar, beating out the likes of Anne Margaret and Glenda Jackson to win Best Actress. Also, she's in less than 17% of the film, which is a record low for a Best Actress winner.
Wow, nice.
Yeah. And have you seen Louise Fletcher's acceptance speech at the Oscars?
Yes.
Yeah, her parents are both deaf, and she did sign language to say, you taught me to dream, and you are seeing my dream come true. Thank you.
That's amazing.
Amazing. If only Nurse Ratched had just had that much empathy, it would have been fucking sound, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, Louise Fletcher, lovely. As Nurse Ratched, though, awful. But one of the great Hollywood villains.
Absolutely. Brilliant.
Yeah. Not a villain, though.
Not really.
That's the two leads in the film, and we would be remiss not to go into some detail on the secondary cast who play the patients in the Institute.
Yeah.
We've talked a little about Harding and Cheswick already. We're going to talk more about the Chief shortly. And there's also Bancini, Seafeld, Fredrickson, Tabor. That's Christopher Lloyd in his first film.
He's great. Yeah. He's really good.
Ellsworth, the dancer.
Yeah.
Scanlon with the huge beard.
Yeah.
Always reminds me of Westy.
He's too quiet, man. He's too quiet.
So, who are you going to talk about, Westy?
I'm going to talk about Billy Bibbit, who's played beautifully by Brad Dourif. It's one of them performances that stays with me, and it's really, really powerful. And it's just the innocence that he brings to this character, the mother issues that he's got, how anxious he is, the depression that he's going through. He's just terrified of his own shadow, and he plays it so well to the point where when I first watched this, I wasn't aware who Brad Dourif was. And you kind of go, is this guy really crazy? The stutter that he does is perfectly done, perfectly timed. The pain that he shows, the lack of excitement that he kind of brings to the whole role. I mean, he's most famous for the voice of Chucky, right? I think Brad Dourif, which is ridiculous. Or as Wormtongue in Lord of the Rings. He's fantastic in that as well. I think he's just a wonderful, wonderful actor. And this character I feel so sorry for. I just want to get a hold of him and just kind of have exactly the same reaction that McMurphy does. You know, he just needs to just get out on his own. It's absolutely inspired. I love Brad Dourif in this. I love everybody in this. But for me, Billy Bibbit really sticks in my mind as a very, very memorable character.
Yeah, when I watched this, I actually did know who Brad Dourif was.
Right.
Similar to Louise Fletcher, he played Suda in Star Trek Voyager.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
If Nicholson had been in Star Trek, you would have queued him up. Nicholson was famous for
Of course he would have.
from Star Trek.
He wouldn't fucking shut up about it.
But yeah, as Billy, I think he's very good. Bud Cort was considered as Billy at one point, I assume, when Hal Ashby was involved, because Bud Cort plays Harold in Harold and Maude.
Yeah.
Yes,
but this is his first ever feature film, Brad Dourif, and it's no surprise that he went on to have a very good career, because he's clearly a good actor here.
Yeah.
One of the most realistic depictions of an extreme stutter I think I've seen. And then he went on to have some big roles, like you mentioned, in Westy, Grima Wormtongue in Lord of the Rings, huge.
Yeah.
He voiced Chucky in Child's Play. And I think this probably still, though, stands up, for me, as the best I've seen him.
Yeah, I love him as Wormtongue.
He is great as Wormtongue.
But he's not given enough screen time. I think this is, I mean, to bring this level of artistry to this role, this believability for his first role as well, and how young he was, it's absolutely exceptional.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about someone who brings a little bit of light to the proceedings, so it's a performance I always latch into, and it's Danny DeVito as Martini.
Lovely.
Just a really...
Hit me.
Well, that's the
You
thing.
got 20 showing.
He's so likeable. He's so lovable. He's really engaging, but an absolute nightmare to play games with.
Yeah.
Hit me. Doesn't understand. Anyway, tearing the cigarette up in two. I bet a nickel. Tries to put it back together. I bet a dime.
I bet a dime.
Shit.
You get shit. Try and smoke it.
Shit. Yeah. But it doesn't matter what anyone says to him. He's still so cheery throughout. He doesn't realise how frustrating and irritating he is to everyone else who tries to play by the rules. I mean, Monopoly's a frustrating game at the best of times. So if you were playing with Martini, just going, hotel, on random squares, oh my God, you would just lose it. So, yeah, just a wonderful performance. You can't dislike him no matter how annoying he gets. I really enjoy DeVito on this.
When he has that moment when he turns on Ratchet, he's like, how are we going to win our money back?
Yeah, that's really good.
Fucking brilliant.
He's so innocent, isn't he?
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, Martini's really funny. It is no surprise because Danny DeVito obviously has great comic chops.
Yeah.
And it makes me laugh whenever they're playing poker. All the hit me, until McMurphy's like, I can't hit you, Martini. It's not your turn.
With all the this and the this.
Yeah. But DeVito was, and still is, really good friend with Michael Douglas. They'd been roommates in New York in the 1960s. And then DeVito had played Martini in the Broadway production of Cuckoo's Nest in 71.
Right.
So he was a shoo-in to play Martini here.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine Douglas had cast somebody else in the part his best mate already played.
His housemate. How was work today? Why don't you fuck off?
And also, Mimi Sarkisian, who plays Nurse Pilbo, Ratchet's assistant, she was also in that play with DeVito, which is why she was cast.
Oh, right, nice.
Yeah, very nice.
Very nice. Double date for us there, John, is it? I'll take Ratchet out.
I'll take you over Ratchet too, right?
But DeVito later said that because the shooting schedule was so demanding and crazy, as we've already talked about, he developed a coping mechanism, which was he created an imaginary friend to have imaginary chats with.
Yeah.
But he did become a bit concerned about this. So at one point he asked Dean Brooks, like, is this okay? And Dean Brooks said, yeah, nothing to worry about as long as you can identify that your imaginary friend isn't actually real.
I mean, how do you do that?
Well, yeah. What if Dean Brooks was his imaginary friend? How would you know?
Well, yeah. We didn't think about that, did we?
Yeah.
So a big ensemble cast in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Some who went on to become big stars after the film, and in our two leads, Jack Nicholson and Louise Fletcher, one of the great protagonist-antagonist on-screen relationships.
Oh, yeah.
One of the
Unbelievable.
very, very best.
Definitely.
This episode of All the Right Movies is sponsored by BetterHelp. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is, therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help, or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships or at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now, you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And special offer to all the Right Movies listeners, you can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/ATRM. That's betterhelp.com/ATRM. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this episode.
The middle.
Into the middle of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and as McMurphy's influence on the group grows, so does the inmates' bravery, and we have two big moments that highlight the max impact. The huge moment the chief speaks is one of them, but before that, everyone's gone fishing.
They have.
Yes, they have.
After McMurphy escapes the institute by scaling the fence and dropping miles out of that tree, really high.
Yeah.
He commandeers a school bus and, with the inmates on board, picks up his pal Candy and heads to the North Pacific.
Yep.
How's it all work out, Matt?
Not particularly well, really, for anyone involved, I would say. This fishing trip, I mean, for a start, absolute shocking lack of security in this place.
Ridiculous.
Not one guard sees McMurphy scale the fence and then jump off the massive tree. They're only a few feet away. Yeah. The basketball game isn't that interesting.
Yeah.
What I do find interesting, though, is McMurphy gets out and he doesn't make a run for it. Like, he sees a chance to do something with the patients instead, and he chooses to do that, even though he must know they're going to get caught. Whereas if he did make a run for by himself, there's a much better chance he could get away. So it's just that little shift and change of direction for his character here that I find interesting. But the trip itself, I mean, it's like the worst school trip ever, isn't it? Like, there's these little glimpses of McMurphy doing the right thing. You know, he can teach them the stuff. He can be inspirational. You know, he is getting like a real proper breath of fresh air into the lungs. But that can only go so far. And, you know, he doesn't have that much control. You know, Cheswick should be the last person in charge of steering this boat.
Definitely should be.
Mac!
Yeah, exactly. Like, don't give him the wheel. Martini obviously doesn't have a clue what's going on. We've mentioned very briefly Christopher Lloyd as Tabor. I do love the look here when he gets called Dr. Tabor. He loves that.
Yeah,
the big eyebrow. Takes it really seriously. So, yeah, the scene, it's like a real moment of sunshine in the film. It's just joy for them. It's something really positive. But I've never been able to shake the feeling that it kind of feels like this is from a slightly different film that they've filmed in here. It's weird.
Yeah, I get why this scene's in there. It sets up Candy for the party scene later on. It serves as a bonding session for the inmates. It's a key moment in terms of the impact McMurphy has on the patients. And I think it mixes up the visuals by getting us out from the one-note imagery of the hospital into the open sea. So it's important, but it is my least favourite part of the film, to be honest. It's well shot. The ocean imagery is great. It's funny. I like it when Candy gets on the bus and says, "You all crazy?" And Cheswick just nods his head like, "Oh, yeah." And on the boat, McMurphy just getting it on with Candy with all the guys standing outside on the deck. No shame.
No shame.
Some good things, but the sequence drags for me, to be honest. Outside the hospital, away from Radjord, the narrative sags like a fishing line. It starts to feel a bit like a sitcom, like when Cheswick and Harding are fighting over who gets to steer the boat. A well-shot sitcom, but with the ratch gone, it loses its potency for me. So, good to see some different images. There are some funny parts, but I am glad when we get back to the hospital as well.
Yeah, again, for me, I think this takes us out the film a little bit, and a little bit too much for me. And I know you said you felt it was well shot there, John. I mean, I don't particularly think it matches the rest of the film at all. And I know it has some themes in there, and I know McMurphy thinks if I just get these guys out of the hospital into some fresh air, they'll see the error of the ways and they'll think, oh, we're fine, let's just get on with it. Again, this is a really selfish move from him, just so he can hook up with Candy, just so he can have his own way, just so he can do what he wants to do out to sea, just so he can prove the point against Nurse Ratched. But again, because I feel like this was one of the last sequences that was shot, and it really sags in the middle for me as well. It really starts to drag, and if it had been a little bit shorter, fine. And also, you know, all of the cast didn't like it. Everyone except Jack Nicholson got seasick. What made it worse was it took a whole week to shoot it, and DeVito said he was queasy thinking about it. Like a whole week to shoot that sequence. What a waste of time.
It makes me queasy when he's trying to peer through the window to catch McMurphy and Candy at it.
Awful. Hit me.
And there is a couple of other notable small appearances here as well. When they come back, we see that crowd standing on the pier. If you look close, you'll see that one of them is Angelica Houston.
Oh, right, really?
Yeah. Well, Jack Nicholson and Angelica Houston were partners for quite a few years, weren't they?
Yeah.
Which I guess is why she's there.
And also the harbour master, who we see trying to stop them get on the boat. He wasn't an actor. He was this random guy called Mel Lambert, who was a used car dealer, and Michael Douglas had just met him on a flight.
Oh, well, there you are. Anyone's allowed in this film, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Just random people.
Yeah.
You want to be me a film?
Fine.
But it's also funny when McMurphy's introducing the guys to the harbour master, and he's like, this is Dr. Tabor, Dr. Fredrickson, the famous Dr. Scanlon, Mr. Harding, and Harding's furious.
You see, I love all that bit. It's just when they actually get out. If they hadn't got out. I know Forman wasn't actually keen on the fishing scene as well, so me and Forman in exactly the same camp, so that's fine.
In more ways than one, I think.
Of course, we're both nuts. He wanted to change it. He wanted the whole film to be shot on the ward, so that when Chief escapes at the end, it would be more dramatic. You know, and I think that's exactly how it should have played out.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. I mean, when he's created that great setting, the confines of the hospital, governed by Ratchet, to take us outside of it, I think is a risk. Yeah. And the film doesn't totally justify it.
Nah, definitely not. There's no reason for it to happen. Nothing actually happened. If someone had an accident on that boat, if they'd lost somebody, if there was repercussions for it, there's nothing. They just go away and they come back. That was it.
Yeah. So our first time away from the Institute, and it's nice to be out, but also good to get back.
Better to get back, yeah.
Get the kettle on.
McMurphy's effect on the group by this point is undeniable, but there's one patient on whom the max impact is particularly profound. It's the Chief.
It is.
Big as a mountain and quiet as the frontier. In these scenes, we see their bond develop as the Chief saves McMurphy from Washington before speaking for the first time in the film.
Yeah.
And then we can't shut him up. Blabbermouth. How are these scenes for you, Westy? The group therapy madness?
Yeah, another great group therapy session, the second one, but it's just the way that this is shot in contrast to the first one. We open with a wide shot of everyone together. There's very limited on the singles. It's basically the group is framed as the group, so they're all part of it now. And then when we cut back to Ratchet, she's on a single. So it's them against her. It's Ratchet turning this whole group against McMurphy in such a genius way. And you find out that they're all voluntary in such a nasty way. Apart from Tabor, obviously, the Chief and McMurphy, they're all in there because they need to be in there. But everyone else has a choice, and it's just his complete disbelief. If everybody, Jesus Christ, tell me you're committed. And it's when it just starts kind of ramping up, and there's just that frustration, and it's just Cheswick. He just wants his cigarettes. I want my cigarettes. And I think it's just really, really brilliant. And there's that wonderful, wonderful speech from McMurphy where he just turns to all of them and says, "What do you think you are, crazy or something?" You know, and it's really the time where you feel like Mac is trapped and the power shifts, and it's a genius shift of power, and how Ratchet turns that round and turns the whole group against McMurphy. But Forman frames them all as a singular group, and then it starts to fall apart. Genius.
Yeah, some nice visual storytelling in there.
Yeah, brilliant.
I love it as well. I think it's a really well-timed and well-placed scene as well, because up until now, McMurphy, he's been funny, he's been charismatic, he's been inspirational. I think this is the first time we really see that other side of him. We see him being out of control. We see him being violent and losing his temper.
Yeah, he's frustrated. The mask has slipped now.
Yeah, you see the mask slipping. But I think also this is when you first really start to see the effect he's having on the others, like Westy said, in a visual manner, them all grouped together. But would Cheswick have stood up to Ratchet in the past the way that he does here when he's demanding his cigarettes?
Yeah.
If it wasn't for McMurphy, I don't think so. And it's a scene that just really taps into that theme, doesn't it? Individuality versus conformity. And Nicholson just on absolute fire here in this scene. Great stuff.
Yeah, this scene's probably the most memorable moment from my first watch of the film. I remember being nearly as shocked as McMurphy when I found out half the inmates were there by choice.
Yeah, it's a fantastic twist.
Yeah. And what starts becoming apparent as well is that Mac has a lot more respect for his fellow inmates than Ratchet in the hospital does.
Yeah.
That line you mentioned, Westy, where he tells them they're no crazier than the average asshole out on the street.
Yeah.
That's one of the most powerful and thought-provoking lines in the film for me. I mean, at what point does someone cross that line? Especially if they're committing themselves. Should most of them even be there?
Yeah.
Also, Washington is an arsehole.
He is an arsehole. Doing his job, man.
Yeah. Now, we agree on that one, John.
Yeah. When he's got McMurphy pinned to the floor and he's going, "It's over, McMurphy."
Yeah. Really hits him.
Meant to be looking after these people, not wrapping your belt around your knuckles. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And I think after what you see here, you need like a moment to lift you back up. So when the Chief lets Mac know that he can talk and he can hear and you get his first words. It's just pure joy because it's so unexpected. It's like a twist you don't see coming at all. I love how there's no foreshadowing at all. There's no evidence. There's no hint that he is anything other than this big mute mountain of a guy. And it's a real pick-me-up moment. Like after everything's kicked off, they're all in trouble. It's the perfect time for the chief to drop his facade here for McMurphy. And I just love how it's such an innocuous thing to break the silence over chewing gum.
Yeah.
Thank you. Like Nicholson's reaction, his face
stamping. Jesus
incredible.
Christ, Chief.
Yeah. Because he's thinking, did he just, if I give him another one, will he say something else and all this? And it's brilliant because just before this as well, we've seen Cheswick dragged away screaming. So we know something bad is going to happen to him, but we don't know what. So we dread to think what's going on. So this moment with the chief, it just relieves the tension. And I really enjoy Will Sampson in this. I think he's really good as the chief.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Yeah.
It's just the way he's been able to be so clever to keep this from everybody, to just stand there and observe and be so patient until he's found the one person worthy of breaking the silence for, which is Mac. And Mac, in return, he's found his equal. He's found the person he can count on to escape with. And then once you get this moment, which picks you back up, you're into the electroshock therapy scene.
Yeah, you get Cheswick wheeled past after he comes out. It's heartbreaking, that.
It is. I mean, this scene just every time just brings you right back down again.
Yeah, it's amazing as well because the chief's done everything McMurphy wanted to do in field.
Yeah.
Fooled everyone.
Yeah, it is a big moment, the big twist of the film, really. And I get why his first words are thank you. It's almost like he's thanking McMurphy for sparking the change in him and everyone.
Yeah.
But it would definitely have been funnier if his first words had just been, juicy fruit from nowhere.
Should have been, yeah.
Ah, juicy fruit.
Big as a tree trunk, Chief Bromden. He is played by Will Sampson, and I think it's a very visual performance from him. I mean, he's hardly Catherine Hepburn, is he? But he looks perfect.
What a reference.
Yeah. Can't imagine Catherine Hepburn as the chief, like as good as she was.
And a great basketball player.
Yeah. Michael Douglas said that because they were looking for somebody with such a specific look, the chief wasn't easy to cast. And it was actually Mel Lambert, the used car salesman that we mentioned earlier, who's actually in the film by accident, who recommended Sampson. So Douglas said that Lambert called him one day from his car lot and said, Michael, the biggest son of a bitch Indian came in the other day.
Yeah, we're quoting Mel Lambert there, obviously. Native American for us.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But he was a park ranger in Oregon, Will Sampson, and also an artist.
Right.
Forman said that he had paintings hung in the Smithsonian in Washington.
Wow.
And I saw footage from the set where Will Sampson says, I'm a painter, don't call me an actor.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
I mean, I'll call him whatever he wants, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's fine by me, mate.
Call him what you want, don't call him in the morning.
And that is the end of Act 2. It's all happening, big character moments and reveals as we get closer to the inevitable, the final clash between McMurphy and Ratchet.
Oh, gold.
The Crew.
A lot of unknown faces in front of the camera on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and some slightly better known ones behind it.
Yeah,
we're talking about Jack Nicholson as composer and Haskell Wexler and Bill Butler as the directors of photography shortly, but as ever, the writing first.
Yep.
So the credited screenwriters of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest are Lawrence Hauben and Bo Goldman. Lawrence Hauben was an actor turned screenwriter, and this, it seems, was his only film writing credit.
Wow. Yeah.
Whereas Bo Goldman had experience as a Broadway lyricist and writer and a TV writer. He had written one film before, The Paradigm Case in 1962, but Cuckoo's Nest was his first film that would be remembered.
Right.
So what do you think of the writing, Matt?
I think it's a very, very intelligent and very detailed piece of writing, and I think it probably gave people a real fresh perspective on these issues and these practices. I mean, I can't say I've seen loads, but I think portrayals of hospitals like this that I've seen in films before were always probably quite melodramatic. Like every patient would be in a straitjacket and they'd be ranting and raving. And there's a bit of that in this, but I think the way the writing details the day-to-day lives is quite something. You know, things like the calming music playing throughout.
Yeah.
Just queuing up patiently to get your medication, the monotonous therapy sessions, which are actually just talking about the most ordinary things. It's one of those depictions where it's remarkable how unremarkable it is. You know what I mean? Like, that's what goes on there. And I think the writing does downplay a lot of what people would expect these places to be like. And I think another big part of the writing is that theme of uniformity versus individuality, which, you know, my perspective on that in this film has changed over the years, because I think it's easy to look at McMurphy and say, yeah, he wants everyone to live their own lives. He wants them to get out of the queue. He wants them to get off the medication, make their own decisions for a change. And that's how I initially took it. And that's great, but I think it's more complex than that, because who's McMurphy to say that is better for everyone? Like, if some people to get through life feel the need to check into somewhere like this, to have a bit of routine, to have a bit of uniformity, is there anything really wrong with that if that's what they genuinely want? I mean, obviously, the practices that go on here, I think that's a different matter entirely to talk about. But yeah, that theme, which is front and center in the film with all those details, I think it's a lot more complex than I used to think it was.
Yeah, there is a lot going on. I mean, we mentioned that Ratched's the classic authoritarian archetype, and the story structure is the kind that often goes along with that kind of villain, the savior narrative, where a main character rescues a group of people from their kind of circumstances. Like Andy Dufresne gives hope to the inmates at Shawshank Prison. Cool Hand Luke does the same in a Florida prison camp.
Yeah.
Here, McMurphy is the light in like the darkness of the hospital. He brings the patients hope, mainly, I think, by showing them how to express themselves and regain their identities.
Yeah.
As soon as McMurphy shows up, he brings laughter to the ward, not just from us, the audience. McMurphy himself laughs a lot in the film.
Yeah, he does, yeah.
But also, through McMurphy, Billy has sex. I mean, presumably we don't see it. McMurphy inspires the chief, previously deaf and dumb, to speak and then escape. That's all huge, but what makes it even better for me is how that's developed further, and there's this constant thematic battle between the light and the dark. It's personified in McMurphy and Ratched, obviously, but it's in the narrative structure as well. When something positive happens, it's almost always undercut immediately by something negative. Billy has sex, but minutes later, cuts his own throat. I mean, I can definitely relate to having a one-night stand that makes you want to kill yourself, but not actually going through with it. Then the chief speaking is an exhilarating moment, but seconds later, Cheswick's wheeled past, having undergone shock therapy, and he's just like a gibbering wreck.
Yeah.
That kind of positivity being abruptly ended by something shocking happens all the way through the film. So, excellent writing for me, with layers to it, and that they managed to mine a lot of humour in there is really impressive. Martini cheating at every game is always a joy.
Yeah, definitely.
Wonderful stuff.
Yeah, I think the themes that you guys have touched on are, you know, very, very important, and it does explore things that people were scared to approach, especially in, you know, mid-70s. And I think that's why it resonated so much with so many people. What I get from it is, are the crazy people really crazy? Or are they actually sane? Is Nerds Ratched more insane than they are, trying to stick to these rules and to have some kind of formality to life and to have some kind of routine to life? Is that insanity? If you don't do that, you are deemed as being, you don't fit into society, therefore you must be insane. But for me, that's what the whole thing is trying to say is, you know, what is insanity? What is craziness? What is the point where it goes too far, like you said, John? And I think one of the other things that it touches on very, very importantly is oppression, and that we've got all of the orderlies are all black and all of the inmates are all white. So you have that oppression from the black man on the white man inside of this institution where anything goes. And there's that reverse of oppression, and they get the chance to do that, and they take full advantage of that. And they're taking out the oppression of their race on these people who are deemed to be insane. And I think that in itself is an incredible theme that's just touched on in this film, as well as a lot of things I just touched on, which is what makes it, for me, very, very thought-provoking writing, very, very mature writing, and very, unfortunately, very timeless writing.
It definitely is timeless. I totally agree.
Yeah.
And in bringing the book to the screen, the first person Michael Douglas hired to write the screenplay was Ken Kesey, the author of the book.
Yeah.
Kesey did write a draft, but there were major creative differences with Douglas and Zantz, so he left and was replaced by Lawrence Hauben and Bo Goldman. And Goldman actually went on to win quite a few screenwriting accolades, but said the greatest award I ever got was the chance to adapt Ken Kesey's novel.
Right.
Yeah. I think they knew they were working with something really special.
Yeah. Not so nice for Kesey. He was furious.
Of course he was. It's all that LSD wearing off.
Yeah, so the story in the book is essentially the same, but they did change quite a few details. So in the book, it's told from the point of view of the chief, and he narrates the story to the reader, whereas obviously in the film, they shift the perspective to McMurphy.
Yeah, that was the main point of contention between Kesey and the producers. He wrote the script from the chief's point of view, and Douglas and Zantz weren't having it for a second. They wanted McMurphy's point of view, which I think cinematically probably does work better.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the two characters of Chief and McMurphy in the book were stated to be war veterans, which would kind of add to the characters and add to the backstory that they had. And I think if you knew that McMurphy had been in a war, you know, before the 60s, even World War II or even Korea, you'd kind of go, yeah, understand that. Understand why he's doing what he's doing and the way he is.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, we get no backstories at all, hardly, do we?
No. And that's in the book, and I think that's pretty important.
Yeah. And also in the book, they have these surreal dreamlike sequences, like this one moment where Ratchet touches a wall and it starts to bleed. And Kesey did include these in his version of the screenplay, but obviously in the film, completely absent.
Yeah, that's too far out, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Kesey used to work in a psychiatric hospital and took part in a medical study to test the effects of LSD.
Of course he did.
Well, there we go.
He said that seeing the patient when he was off his box, not his words, they're my words.
He's an author, for Christ's sake.
That made him realise that therapy and straitjackets didn't solve the real problem. The problem was society, and that's where the idea of McMurphy and the story came from.
Yeah.
Right. And also in the book, talking about McMurphy, he had quite a different personality. He was a tough guy who'd resort to violence to get what he wants. And in the poker games, they're not just playing for cigarettes, he's conning them out of the money as well.
Yeah. All of a sudden, Ken Kesey wanting Gene Hackman to play McMurphy makes a lot more sense.
It does,
bit more,
definitely.
Yeah.
Slamming heads off
Hackman
tables.
Yeah. Washington wouldn't have stood a chance against the big man.
Absolutely not.
Hackman would have been shouting, "It's over, Washington."
And then in the book, towards the end, McMurphy is mentally defeated by Ratchet and he begins to conform to the rules. And when Cheswick sees us, he feels betrayed and kills himself.
Wow. Grim.
Grim.
Yeah.
On a lighter note, do you know where the title of the book and the film comes from?
It's a poem, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of. It comes from an old American nursery rhyme.
Right, okay.
Right.
So in the book, the chief says that his grandmother used to read it to him, and it goes, one goes east, one goes west, one flew over the cuckoo's nest.
Right.
Which is better than British nursery rhymes about the Black Death and Georgie Porgy, sex pervert.
Yeah, awful. Yeah. Classic British oppression. Lovely. Get that in your screenplay. Kesey said that in shifting the perspective and changing the character of McMurphy, the filmmakers had butchered his novel. I can kind of see where he's coming from if he's not the protagonist. Fair enough. So he sued for $800,000 and 5% of the film's gross, and it was settled out of court. So God knows how much he got. But he vowed never, ever to watch the film. And to his death in 2001, he always claimed that he'd never watched it.
Yeah. Stephen King, fuck easy.
Yeah, massively, aye. Yeah. He's taking a chapter out of King's book there. I like Terrence Malick with the Thin Red Line. Never seen it.
And yeah, not long before he died, Kesey apparently told a story that one evening he was in bed watching late night TV. He was flipping through the channels and came across a film set in a mental hospital. He was struck by it immediately and was thinking, this is what the adaptation of Cuckoo's Nest should have been like. And then after a minute or so, he realised that it was Cuckoo's Nest. And he said that when he realised, he immediately turned the channel over.
Spite.
Full of shit.
So like, yeah, it's all right, but I'm still not watching it.
Yeah. This is exactly what it should have been like. Oh, shit.
For writing the screenplay to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Lawrence Howman and Bo Goldman won Best Adapted Screenplay at the Oscars. Goldman then won another, actually, for Melvin and Howard in 1980.
Oh, yeah.
So the writing on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the process may not have been straightforward, and Ken Kesey wasn't a fan, but we think it turned out very well.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's brilliant.
100%.
Onto the music now, and the composer on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was Jack Nicholson. After rising to prominence in the 1960s, working with the likes of Phil Spector, the Rolling Stones, and Neil Young, if anything's going to send you to a mental hospital, it's those guys. After that, Nietzsche gravitated towards the film industry and scored Performance with Jagger and Richards, still in there.
Wow.
The Exorcist with Mike Oldfield and William Friedkin.
Yeah.
And then One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Miloš Forman. Outrageous collaborations, those.
Yeah, ridiculous. Kesey wasn't the only one on LSD, surely.
Yeah. Whether he's in music or in film, Jack Nicholson works with the Nutters.
Yeah.
How's his work here, though, Westy?
I think his work here is wonderful. I think it's very, very accessible. Again, when we talk about music a lot, it seems to be, is this a memorable? Does it have a theme? Does a character have a theme? Is it through the film? Is it repeated? Is it memorable in that way? And I think for me, it's the juxtaposition between the institution and nature and how that's transferred to the soundtrack. It's just underpinning, and I know he did all of the calm music that's supposed to be going on. But for me, it's the end of the film, which we'll go on to. But I'll just touch on the music on the end of the film. Like when, there's that moment with Chief. That music in that scene is just heartbreaking. Yeah. It's melancholic, but it's triumphant at the same time. And I just really, really remember, and it's so memorable. And if he did nothing else in the whole score but that final track, I think just that one track is worthy of all the accolades that he got for the film. Incredible stuff.
Yeah, I think when the film opened as well, it's really memorable.
Yeah.
The first shot is of Depot Bay in Oregon, the landscape with the mountains in the background and the river in the foreground. That shot with the main theme, I think if you stop the film there, a lot of people would say they were watching a Western.
Yeah. It's that Native American influence as well.
Yeah. Definitely, yeah. That's how it feels to me. I think the music sounds like it's from a different genre a lot of the time. I'm not sure if that was done intentionally or not by Jack Nicholson, but it works really well because it creates this kind of slightly off-kilter juxtaposition between the music and the visuals that reflects the setting and the main characters, I think, very well.
Yeah.
And the main theme, is it just me, or does that sound like Please Release Me by Engelbert Humperdinck?
No, you mentioned it.
I'm sure it's got the same chord structure because I hear Humperdinck every time.
Very, very possibly, yeah. He's probably just off his box, to use your term.
Everyone was, I think.
Yeah. What year is this? Who gives a fuck?
But yeah, collaborating with all the crazies, Jack Nicholson, so who better to score One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest than him?
Exactly.
I think sometimes we look at soundtracks the wrong way because we often say, don't we, oh yeah, this is one I would own, this is one I'd get the vinyl for, I'd listen to this at home. But that's not always the point of soundtracks. It's great when you can do that, but...
Is it not?
Well, no, see, conversely, the point is ultimately they've got to add to the film. And that's absolutely the case here with this one.
Definitely.
It's subtle and it's very sparsely used, but when it is used, it's really effective. But actually, then kind of what stands out to me is how there's no music at all in the hospital scenes, in the therapy scenes, apart from music they're playing on set. Like, a lesser film would stick something really saccharine or goofy over the top, but Forman knows it's better without. So it's not a case of me liking it as such. It's a case of me thinking, that's really effective when it's used and when it's not used. So if I had to pick something that stands out, I think that music along the opening and closing credits, that's performed on a board saw using wine glasses as percussion, which I think just the creativity of that's amazing.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Just what he had lying about after being with the Stones.
Yeah, exactly.
I shudder to think.
Surprised didn't get Jimmy Page in there to do that.
Exactly. I'm surprised the snare wasn't a fucking crack pipe.
Like just about everybody else on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Jack Nicholson was nominated for an Oscar. His for Best Original Score. He lost out to...
Would have been John Williams, wouldn't it, for Jaws?
Of course it was, for Jaws.
Yeah.
I mean, fair enough.
Fair enough.
Can't complain.
E and F.
But Nicholson's work on Cuckoo's Nest, we're fans of it.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think I'll buy the vinyl if I'm allowed.
Is he allowed, Matt?
Well, all 3 minutes of video, go for it.
Medication time.
The visuals are key to the success of, any film. And it's the cinematography we're looking at now. There were 2 credited directors of photography on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That was Haskell Wexler and Bill Butler. We'll talk a little bit later on why there were 2 DPs, but for now, some serious expertise here, Matt.
Going to Westy, are you?
How does One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest look?
I think it looks great, and it's very much the same as the music for me. It's about serving the story, and it's like Forman's direction. It's not necessarily going to grab your attention straight away because it's quite straightforward, straightforward shot choices, straightforward compositions, straightforward lighting. But the important thing is it's the right thing to do for this story. So it's not one where I can take it apart like scene by scene and shot by shot and go, wow, that looks amazing. The awesome striking images there to do with the actors, when Nicholson is kind of having that conversation with Dr. Spiffy and he's just slumped with his head in his hand, things like that. But every shot looks right and it looks correct and it all fits. And that's the most important thing, I think.
Yeah, it has an effortless feel, the visuals, I think.
Yeah.
There's a crane shot I really like at the start of the second group therapy session where Ratchet's addressing the group and the camera kind of glides in over everybody to exclude everybody else from the frame but her. That's really good.
Yeah.
I think in terms of how the film looks, Forman wanted a very naturalistic look, like we mentioned before, but creating simplicity isn't always simple. And there's a few things I noticed. The colour palette, I think, is very specific. The walls of the ward and the costumes of the orderlies and nurses are all white. The nurses dress in like a brilliant white, but the inmates are in like a kind of dingy white.
Yeah.
I mean, that's about as subtle a difference as you can get, maybe to muddy the lines between which side is which.
Yeah.
And the lighting is very natural and subtle. And the camera movements are mostly noticeable in how little the camera moves.
Yeah.
And again, I think this is because Foreman wanted to feel very realistic. He wants us to feel like we're sitting in the hospital in those sessions. And what's interesting, though, and you've kind of touched on this, Westy, are the times when they break that rule and the camera does move often seem to revolve around Ratchet.
Yeah.
There's the shot I just mentioned, the one I mentioned earlier in the basketball scene, the low angle pushing at the window. And there's another in the session where Harding loses his cool that you were told about, Westy, where the camera slowly pushes in on Ratchet, ending like a close-up on her face. It's almost as if sometimes she's controlling the camera herself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So visually, I like it a lot. Very subtle, yet somehow still very striking at the same time.
Yeah, I think the biggest praise we can give the film is that it doesn't feel like it's split down the middle at all. It doesn't feel like there's two DPs on it. It doesn't feel like there's a massive difference. You cannot see where Bill Butler came in and Wexler left. Apart from maybe Bill Butler comes in and then they say, right, let's get these fuckers on a boat. He's done Jaws.
Yeah.
Right, let's do that. Any yellow barrels we can hide in the water. No.
I've got a special camera for this.
Where did you get that from? Spielberg. But like you said, John, there's them slow push-ins that seem to be in the first half of the film. And then in the second half of the film, we'll go for more wide shots of the group. It's a little bit more ambitious in its lens choice. Like we say, there's not a lot of camera movements, even especially when there's a brawl. That's when the camera gets very, very erratic. But apart from that, the only movement we get is the inmates and the characters themselves. And I think Foreman would put that across to whoever was shooting this and say the movement comes from the frame. The frame doesn't move. And I think that is really, really important to it. But I know Wexler did say there was only a minute or two of this film that I didn't shoot when he saw the final cut.
Right, really.
Right. Interesting.
Well, you don't know how much you believe, do you, man? It does look very, very similar. But if you watch it on fast forward, like I have, you watch it 10 times fast, the colour palette does start getting a lot warmer. But, I mean, no one else is going to give a shit about that apart from me.
I mean, normally in a film where the camera doesn't move a lot, the visuals can get really boring. But here, that just doesn't happen at all.
No, I think this is because the characters aren't boring. And I think the compositions are beautiful because they're all mid-shots and they've got movement and they've got a real energy to the characters. And Foreman knows that. You start moving the camera with that kind of energy, you're going to get lost.
Yeah, so we've been talking about him, Haskell Wexler. He was the first DP. Probably more famous before this for the likes of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Thomas Crown Affair, and The Heat of the Night, incredible looking films. And he had 31 days on this before he was fired. And Wexler said he believes it was because he was working on a documentary called Underground about the weather underground. But Forman has come out with the classic line, it was artistic differences.
Yeah, the Weather Underground were like a far left militant group. And the artistic differences between Forman and Wexler were apparently over lighting and how best to shoot a film inside a hospital, like a building not designed for filmmaking. Yeah. And Wexler later said, I know a lot more about shooting than Miloš does.
Wow, then. All right, mate.
Well, Michael Douglas has said that firing Wexler was the hardest thing he's ever had to do, but ultimately it was either him or Forman who had to go. So then Bill Butler came in and he did 30 days before he left for another commitment. And then William A. Fraker came in to do the fishing sequence, which we've talked about.
Wasn't Butler.
Yeah, uncredited at the end, I think.
Yeah, right. It was Butler.
But Bill Butler came into this on the back of shooting The Conversation and Jaws.
Yeah.
That is one hell of a 1, 2, 3. And then after this, Grease and the Rocky sequels are as good as it gets for Bill Butler. By the 90s, he was doing Beethoven's Second and Anaconda. I mean, what happened there?
Easy Life.
Who did he piss off?
Yeah.
Wexler, probably. Yeah. Hold on. Didn't he replace Wexler on The Conversation as well?
Did he?
Yeah. And Wexler got kicked off The Conversation and Butler replaced him on that as well.
Right. Wow.
No wonder he's pissed off.
Between those two.
Yeah.
Something going on there.
Yeah.
Well, Haskell Wexler and Bill Butler were Oscar nominated for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Do you know who they lost out to?
Whoever did Barry Lyndon?
It was Barry Lyndon, and the DP was John Alcott.
John Alcott, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Some big winners of the Oscars that year.
Big year, wasn't it?
So some massive talents behind the cameras as well as in front of them on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And I think it's plain to see that Lawrence Hauben, Bo Goldman, Jack Nicholson, Haskell Wexler and Bill Butler all left their marks on a classic.
Definitely did.
Left the marks on each other as well.
Black eyes.
The end.
The final act is often where things come crashing down, and with character conflict coming left and right, that is certainly true of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yes, it is.
We're going to be going all in on the climax of the film, where the narrative baton passes from the Mac to the Chief. But first, it's party time.
Yes! Thank fuck.
Yuletide in Oregon, and the inmates are celebrating. After Ratchet and the orderlies leave one night, McMurphy brings in a load of booze and spends Christmas with the cranks. In these scenes we see Candy and Rose, Billy becoming a stud, and then tragedy as he takes his own life. Booze, music, sex, fights and death. Standard Christmas party for you, isn't it, Matt?
Invite in the post, John. Just let me know. Also, going to say Christmas for the Cranks, that's probably our finest pun yet. Right. That's a deep cut, that. People will get that one.
I'm speechless.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, this party, it's the funniest sequence in the film for me, but then obviously turns into a tragedy. But who makes it for me? Scatman Crothers is Turtle.
Yeah. Brilliant.
What does he think he's doing here? Like, $20 and a few bottles of booze is all it takes for him to let all hell break loose. Like,
on the whole ward as well.
On the whole, how did he get this job in the first place? Like, so easily distracted when he's just waving at Candy, not even listening to what McMurphy's saying. And then when Candy and a friend are in the washroom and he's saying, sure, you can take a bath. Very interesting, very interesting. It's like, has this guy never interacted with a woman before? It's like the first time he's ever met one. And, like, what does he think is going to happen when he's in there with Candy's friend? What does he think is going to happen in the rest of the ward? And the most hilarious bit, though, is when he tries to hide with him instead of talking to the supervisor. Someone asks where he is, and someone else says, oh, he's jerking off somewhere else, and he just pipes up, ain't no one jerking off anywhere, motherfucker. And then that same person asks him what he's doing there. Doing the same fucking thing you're doing, hiding. Like, he's just an absolute clown of an employee. The worst liar.
He's wonderful.
Oh, it's a wonderful performance, but he's the worst liar I've ever seen in a film. Ain't nobody in there when there's all kinds of like banging and rattling going on. It just this whole thing that has that vibe of when you were a kid and the teacher's out of the room for 10 minutes, so everyone starts running riot until you hear the teacher coming back and you try to get everything back under your desk and wipe the crap off the blackboard, whatever you've been doing. It's really, really funny. But I would say it's one of these ones where I think it's so selfish by McMurphy. Like, even if he escapes, the others are still going to cop for it. You know, no cigarettes for anyone after this. So, it's a really selfish decision by him. And I think everything that happens after this scene comes down to what he's done here. But it's really funny all the same.
Yeah. I mean, when Ratchet leaves the hospital before the party starts, it's like late at night. And then she's back in the ward first thing in the morning. Yeah. I mean, say what you like about her, but she puts a shift in. Does Ratchet?
She definitely does. That's what I mean. What's she going home doing? Nothing. Sleeping in the car.
Yeah, exactly. For 3 hours and back. Yeah. And then Scatman Crothers just turns up from nowhere. Just in there.
Yeah.
He's called Turgle, but he's surely just Dick Halloran, who he plays in The Shining.
Yeah, of course it is.
Exactly the same guy.
He just rang up Michael Douglas, like, could I be in? Yeah, just turn up tomorrow.
Yeah. It's funny when Candy and Rose arrive, Mac's at the window waving them in, and we see Turgle behind the soundproof glass just like mouthing, son of a bitch.
It's amazing.
But every time I'm like, just leave, for God's sake. Matt Murphy and the Chief, get out there. The window is wide open. This is your chance. But they don't.
No.
And again, I would say the party sequence, it drags a touch for me, to be honest.
Okay.
It goes on a little bit too long, seeing as not a huge amount happens narratively, but it's made up for by being really funny, especially when Turgle's in there. Ain't nobody jerking off. No way, motherfucker.
Really angry. Just get out there and talk to your supervisor. Oh, my God.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go for the aftermath of the party, for as fun as that is. And I know it drags on a little bit, but it does set it up for this. And when Ratchet comes back in, that fear. It's just palpable, isn't it, when she's walking back in, and it is just terrifying, and everybody knows, oh shit, we're fucked up here. McMurphy's waking up and he's like, oh shit, I should have left a long time ago, and it's all just starting to ramp up. But it's that treatment here, like I mentioned before, in Brad Dourif's performance, and her treatment of Billy is absolutely abhorrent. This emotional manipulation just to regain control of the situation is disgusting. And he comes out, and the way he runs down the corridor, and he's butt naked, and he's just getting his pants on, and he's smiling at everybody. It's that close up. It's not necessarily a two shot. He turns one way and he's looking at the group and he's smiling, and he turns back towards Nurse Ratched and he's not. And it's just that tragedy and comedy between that performance, and I think that's just so wonderful. But it's when she just says, "Are you ashamed?" and he says he's not. And you think, that's it, he's cured, great. Yeah. And then she brings him right back down. What worries me is how your mother's going to take this. And he's like, oh, fuck, don't tell me. But we're very good friends. Well, I'm going to have to let her know what's going on here. And he's broken, and she knows that he's broken him. And there's that moment, and you just think, McMurphy, again, the window's open. It's there. You can go. The girls are there. Go now. And he just leaves the keys on there. But then it's his morals. It's not his ego. This is his morals. She's wrong. I cannot leave these people with this person. I've got to take her out of the equation because she is evil. She is now the personification of evil and just treating these people disgustingly. And I've got to take her out of the equation. And is it just me? Or does Nurse Ratched go all Schwarzenegger on Mars in Total Recall when she's getting strangled?
The bulging eyes.
Yeah, just watch it again. It's like, whoa. But yeah, that gets him. But it's just that explosion from McMurphy. For a fact he's going to get punished for this. And just it's just how close it was. It's there. The window's there. It's open. You can smell fresh air. Get out of there. Yeah. And he doesn't. Tragedy, but amazing sequence.
Yeah. Yeah, another narrative moment where the brightness of the party is quickly destroyed by the darkness that follows. But what this scene highlights to me most is that, and following off from what I said earlier, answering George's question, if there was any doubt whether or not Ratched's the villain, it's put to bed here for me. Yeah. Because you've talked about it, Westy, but of all the bad things Ratched does, the worst for me is how she treats Billy all the way through. I mean, before this, right in the first act of the film, there's that group session where Ratched reveals in front of everybody that Billy tried to commit suicide. Yeah, that is outrageous from a psychiatric nurse. And then here, after the party, Billy's been doing the wild thing all night, presumably, with Candy. And then when he comes back out, he is talking articulately, and his stutter's all but gone. It's much improved anyway.
Yeah.
And Ratched, like you say, just destroys him, intentionally sets him back by mentioning his mother. But also, and this is some excellent writing, that line about Billy's mother suddenly creates this whole backstory for Billy, for me.
Yeah.
It's all about his mother. She's the reason he has the stutter. Yeah. He says he's voluntarily in the hospital, but he's not. His mother has made him volunteer.
Yeah, she's put him there. Yeah.
And when McMurphy said there was nothing wrong with Billy, he was right. He shouldn't be there. He should be bird dogging chicks.
Yeah.
And worst of all, Ratched says she knows Billy's mother, so she knows all of this. And she's knowingly complicit in basically destroying Billy's life. And then, I'm still going on about it. And then, when they find Billy's body, Ratched says to the patients, the best thing we can do is go about our day. He's dead.
Yeah.
Only does she not give a shit about Billy, but she's talking to people who are his friends. And she basically says he doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that he's dead. She views them all as like less than human. And as for Turkle, we don't find out what happens, but presumably he got fired, and that guy can have no complaints.
No, he don't.
What a way to get fired, though.
Yeah. I don't think she does anything wrong here, personally. No, it's devastating, this moment, because Billy does such a sweetheart, just such an innocent soul, and it's a scene for me that it plays differently the more I watch it. And I would say, just to come at it from a slightly different angle, I would say McMurphy does have blood in his hands here as well, though, because everything he's done has been all fun and games until you see the effect it's had here. And did he ever take a minute to really think about where Billy was emotionally? Is he going to be able to cope with hooking up with the prostitute on the ward? He doesn't think about the consequences. And, one thing that should be pointed out is Ratched at one point says to Washington, stay with him until the doctor arrives. So whatever Washington does, for whatever reason, he ignores that and leaves Billy by himself. So I think Washington is complicit here as well, a little bit for me, of why Billy ends up dead. But the one bit that gets me, and it's a bit where I'd agree with you, John, Ratched gives that little smirk at Mac as Billy's led away to say, see what you've done? I've got you now.
Yeah.
Well, Time for another Patreon question now. It comes from Jacob Perry, and it has nothing to do with this scene, but it does involve McMurphy.
Okay.
So Jacob asks, Battle of the Macs, McMurphy versus McCready, who wins? Jacob has some stipulations. One-on-one, bare knuckle, no flamethrowers. And we should clarify that McCready is R.J. McCready, the lead character played by Kurt Russell in The Thing.
Right.
So, Matt, RP or R.J.?
I'm going to go for RJ, and I have two reasons.
Of course you are.
Of course I am, obviously. What else was I going to say?
Exactly.
First reason, throughout the thing, he's pretty much drunk, so he's going to be drunk, and punches hurt a lot less when you're drunk than they do when you're sober, so he'd be able to take a lot more.
Is that the voice of experience there, Matt?
Oh, every Saturday night's all right for fighting around seeing, you know what it's like.
It's the only time he gets punched when he's mortal.
Exactly. The second one, obviously, the end of the thing, he could be the Thing, so he could, just sprout a tentacle and rip off McMurphy's head.
Yeah, I mean, we only see McMurphy have one fight in the film against Washington, and he gets his ass handed to him. So it has to be McCready, who at least does survive a battle or two with the Thing.
Yeah.
And also, it's over McMurphy. Kurt Russell would knock that line out of the park.
Yes, he would.
So, unless McMurphy's played by Hackman, in which case McCready, Childs, Windows, throw them all in, and it's no contest.
Yeah. It depends if the Chief's in the wings. Really, doesn't it?
Man.
Yeah, he's right-hand man, isn't it? Because, I mean, he'd just pick him up and throw him away. Yeah, it's McCready for me, definitely. He's just a badass, isn't he? He'd just kick the shit out of him. He'd be just, throw a couple of women in there, and McMurphy would be running around like a headless chicken. McCready just knock him straight out, one punch, no problem. But yeah, McCready, easy.
So, unanimous, that one. 3-0.
Definitely.
Yeah, not often that happens.
A roller coaster of a sequence there then. Sad to see Billy go, and unfortunately for RP, there's going to be consequences for him too.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The day after the night before, and the party atmosphere is over as Mac is separated from the group. Speculation and rumour about his fate is rife until we find out the truth. Mac's been lobotomized, and the chief isn't very happy about it.
Nope.
John Dunphy might be full of shit, but I know it isn't. Matt, what do you think of the climax?
The climax, it's just devastating in so many ways. And I think the build-up to the revelation that Max had the lobotomy is just as important, because it looks like everything's just back to normal. Ratchet's back on the ward, big neck brace, obviously, but still has control over everyone. I like when Seafeld comes back, he's had his teeth fixed, and it's just like, you feel better, don't you? So just everything's back to normal for her. Yeah. But you can feel Mac's influence, and you can see it. Harden is dealing out the cards, and he's got all the patter that McMurphy had when he was dealing out the cards. He is one for tapes. It's really subliminal, but it's in there. Martini clearly learned shit about how to play cards, obviously. Still doesn't know what he's doing, but that's funny. Hit me. And McMurphy himself, it's like he's become an urban legend now. Like when Seafeld comes back, that story about he took two guards out and escaped. It's like he's just been elevated as something bigger than he was, bigger than a man almost. And that's what makes his ending all the more shocking. Like, it's incredible to me that they would do this to anyone in the 20th century.
Yeah.
Like,
I know.
Just, it's astonishing. And it's such a complicated moment to land because, Mac wouldn't want this existence and he'd want release from it, but it's still murder. Chief is still killing him. And underneath the charm and the humour, he is a reprehensible individual, but doesn't he still have a right to exist as a human being, not a vegetable? Who has the right to take that away from him? So it's a really complicated ethical, moral question that the lobotomy throws up here. Is the lobotomy worse than a murder? And it doesn't have an easy answer. And that's really incredible to me. And while it's asking you that question, it lands the big emotional beat of the chief saying goodbye to him. You're coming with me. And then just when you think, was he going to get him out of there? Then you just that pillow coming across over the face. It's an ending to a morally murky character that really lingers afterwards. And it's a moment that I think it just really makes you reevaluate your stance on issues like this. I don't know how I should feel at this. And I think that's the point.
I think the whole thing it's trying to say is, what is life and what is it and who are you?
Yeah.
Just because you're alive, if you haven't got your own personality, if you haven't got your own sense of adventure, your own sense of self, you're dead anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great setup earlier where McMurphy pretends to have been lobotomized.
Yeah.
So when we see him this time, we hope he's doing the same again.
Yeah,
Makes the moment that the chief lifts his head and we see the scars.
Oh,
more
God.
shocking.
Yeah.
And the same as you, Mad, what's even more shocking to me is that lobotomies were still being performed in 1963.
Yeah.
The last one apparently took place in 1967, so it is factual.
Christ.
And beggars belief they were still being done in the 60s.
Again, it just goes to show how little they understood the conditions.
Well, exactly. Yeah. And what this whole event means as well is that this is one of the rare films where the antagonist defeats the protagonist. In this case, Ratchet firstly ruins McMurphy's kind of protege in Billy, and then has McMurphy lobotomized, and they both end up dead. So, I mean, it's a huge moment. We're only 5 minutes from the end, and we're on the biggest downer in the film, which takes some guts from a filmmaking point of view.
Absolutely.
And yeah, because it is such a downer, as you've said, John, when Douglas and Sands first came on board, they were shopping the book around studios to get the funding. They went to 20th Century Fox and they said, we'll make the film, but you have to change the ending. So McMurphy lives instead, but they said no and struck the deal with UA instead.
Yeah, for the best, surely. Yeah. And what did they want? Chief slings him over his shoulder, lobotomized, and takes him out with him. And Vincent Schiavelli, who plays Fredrickson, he said filming this scene was really powerful as well. He was in the scene, like in his bed, and he actually fell asleep. But the moment, knowing what was going on, was giving him nightmares. And he was woken up by Forman poking him in the ribs, going, "Stop moving, you're ruining everything."
Well, I'll go kind of find the joy in the end.
Lovely.
When the chief, finds the strength to, he's big as a mountain now. He knows he is. And like Matt touched on there, I think that sequence with him and McMurphy is always going to be heartbreaking for me. You're coming with me. I'm not leaving you this way. Yeah. It's just when there's nothing left in McMurphy with these heads just lolling about. Yeah. And I find it really powerful the way he reacts to that pillow being put on him, because you would expect him just to be dormant and not move and just accept it. But there's still life there. And I find that
instinct.
Yeah, it is that instinct, or is that, is he putting it on? Is he gone too far with that? Did it really work? Did it go to that level? Was he still there? Is he fighting it? Does the chief know? And there's all them questions as well left with it, because he does fight back with some strength. And I find that a really interesting choice, because for me, if I was directing this, I would have it just that pillow over and it would just be the odd movement, but I would need the audience to know that he was dormant and done and finished. But the Forman doesn't do that. He shows there's still a vibrancy there. And again, that questions it for me. I think the big question mark on this ending is, would the chief be able to do what he'd done without that drive of McMurphy dying, without him doing what he's done to Mac? Could he lift that fountain up? Could he find that? Could he find that power without that drive that he needs to do it now? Yeah. He has to get it. If McMurphy was next to him, hooping and hollering, "Go on, chief, lift it up," would he be able to do it to the same degree? Would he be able to? And I honestly don't think he would be. And I think it's the pain of losing him, the pain of accepting and being able to move on, that gives him the strength to do that. And it's that absolute genius move from a filmmaking point of view to smash that window in silence. It's joyous.
Yeah, I said at the top that when I was like early to mid-teens was when I started getting into watching classic films. Yeah. And there were a lot of times when I'd watch a film and have a moment of recognition, like, so this is where you talking to me comes from. Yeah. And here, I remember the chief moving towards the sink and being like, "He's going to throw it through the window," because I'd seen it before.
Yeah, on The Simpsons.
On The Simpsons. I'd seen it on The Simpsons. Yeah. And it is brilliant. Again, set up perfectly in the earlier scene where McMurphy tries and fails to pick the sink up. Yeah. It's a bizarre way to escape, but because of it tying back to the earlier failure, because of it tying back to McMurphy, who's just been killed, it just feels massive. Yeah. It's almost like the final lesson from McMurphy to the chief. The narrative lead changes too. It's not McMurphy's story anymore. Yeah. It's the chief's.
It's the chief's, yeah.
And I've been talking about how moments of light in the film are almost always immediately undercut by moments of darkness. And I think this is the first time that the opposite happens. We hit rock bottom when we see what's happened to McMurphy, but then get the instant euphoria of the chief's escape. Yeah. And I mean, this is how every film should finish. A main character running away into the night. Glorious.
Yeah, amazing. With that soundtrack.
Yeah, it's one of the moments where the soundtrack is so perfect. The way that music crescendos right when the sink hits the window. Yeah. It's timed to perfection. And it's magnificent. And yeah, it's the emotional uplift we need. But as Westy says, there's always a bit of melancholy to it. There's a bit of sadness. You know, realistically, how far is the Chief going to get? You know, you've got hope that he's going to make it somewhere.
Oh, fuck, don't say that, man.
I know. It's one of these where...
Just see him disappear over the brow and then just an ambulance goes after him and then it finishes.
Just hear a big crash off the screen.
Silence. Sirens everywhere.
See, a gunshot. Got him. See,
End of Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah. But yeah, it is. It's a beautiful end of the film. It's so good. It's so fulfilling.
And we're at the end. Devastating consequences for Billy and McMurphy as Ratchet takes her final revenge.
Yeah.
But we end on a ray of light with the escape of the Chief. Well, not if you listen to Matt.
Well, a little bit. Yeah.
Reception and awards.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest did very well for itself on release. On a budget of approximately $4 million, it took a huge return of $163 million.
Wow.
Which was massive.
Yeah.
It did so well at the box office that it was shown in cinemas in Sweden non-stop from its release in 1975 until 1987.
Yeah. What? And that's only because that theatre closed, isn't it? That's the only reason.
Is that why it stopped?
Yeah.
Right. It would still be going now then.
Yeah, it would be, yeah.
The last thing
we loved it.
Yeah.
And as for the critics, let's start with Roger Ebert. What did he think?
Oh, he loved it, didn't he? Come on.
He was a fan, sure.
Full marks.
Of course it was. The full whack from Rog. 4 stars out of 4. And he said, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is a film so good that there's a temptation to forgive it when it goes wrong. But it does go wrong, insisting on making larger points than its story should really carry. And yet, there are those moments of brilliance. So, mixed bag from Rog. 4 stars.
Not too sure what he means there. It's really ambitious, but it shouldn't be, but it's good.
Yeah.
Pauline Kael said, the book was a lyric jag and it became a nonconformist Bible. Miloš Forman must have understood how crude the poetic paranoid vision of the book would look on the screen, and he did an intelligent job of listening Kesey's schematism.
Oh.
Kesey peasy. She didn't say that bit. And in a retrospective review, Empire magazine gave the film 5 stars out of 5 and said, the most radical film to emerge from mainstream Hollywood. Too many classic set pieces to mention, but keep your ears cocked for that immortal line. Juicy fruit.
Yeah.
Certified brilliance.
Mm-hmm.
On Rotten Tomatoes, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest has a critics' approval rating of 93%, which is huge, and even bigger from audiences with 96%. And on IMDb, a very impressive 8.7 out of 10, putting it 19th in the IMDb top 250 list.
Yep, huge.
Nice.
It's one place above 7 and one below Goodfellas.
Oof,
so there's your next Sunday sorted, Westy.
Yep, that's exactly where I am.
At the Oscars, Cuckoo's Nest won 5, which were Best Picture, Best Director for Forman, Best Actor for Nicholson, Best Actress for Louise Fletcher, and Best Adapted Screenplay for Lawrence Hauben and Bo Goldman. Mm-hmm. In doing so, it became the second of only 3 movies ever to win the Big 5 awards at the Oscars.
Yeah.
You know what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
Can you name me that too?
It happened one night.
Yeah.
Silence of the Lambs, yeah.
Correct. The Silence of the Lambs in 1992, and It Happened One Night in 1935. That was directed by Frank Capra.
Capra, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And after the 1976 Oscars, Frank Capra sent Miloš Forman the telegram that said, "Welcome to the club."
Oh, nice.
What did Forman say? Fuck off.
Forman said, "What club?
What club? What are you talking about?" Going back to my hotel room, talking to my friend.
Did Forman say anything similar to Jonathan Demme after Silence? Probably not. I wouldn't have thought.
No, he didn't know. No.
He'd never seen it.
Yeah. Yeah, in the year before Cuckoo's Nest came out, Nicholson had won Best Actor at the BAFTAs, but for Chinatown, and he couldn't accept the award in person because he was filming One Flew Over. So he pre-recorded a joke acceptance speech instead with all the cast from the hospital.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It's really good. It's
really good.
It is brilliant. Funny. Also, it's David Niven who presents the award, so 2 reasons to watch it.
Oh, yeah. Brilliant.
Constant singers. Yeah. So, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was a critical smash on its release, a big box office hit, dominated at the Oscars, did about as well as you could expect, I think.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Sequels and influence.
There weren't any sequels to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Would you have liked to have seen one?
With the Chief, yeah? for sure.
Yeah, the Chief Santic.
Chief on the run.
Like First Blood.
But where have we seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest influence, Matt?
I think it probably goes back to what I said about Nicholson and his 70s run being incredible. So I think the influence of this was just establishing him as one of the best of his generation and really helped cement like his legend as an actor. And then other than that, it's probably the depiction of institutes like this, which are probably a bit more common in film now. Films like Girl Interrupted from the early 2000s, I think Angelina Jolie.
Yeah.
But I think probably its influence is in culture in general was as a real eye-opener. It probably made people go, hang on, what, this goes on? Like forced lobotomies, electrocuting people to make them better, in inverted commas. This is what mental health problems can look like. They're not just ranting and raving and psycho. So, yeah, that's its influence for me, I think. One of those films where the influence on cinema probably isn't that big. I think it's has an influence on the world outside of cinema, which is probably bigger.
Yeah, I mean, as well as Nicholson and other movies, what's also interesting is the film's impact on its subject matter, like psychiatry.
Yeah.
The book was published, like we've said, in 1962. That was at the height of the anti-psychiatry movement in America, which peddled the outdated idea that mental illness doesn't exist, or at best that it's caused by societal or environmental conditions. It's not health-related.
Yeah.
These ideas were then backed up, unintentionally probably, but definitely backed up by One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, a film where the healthcare industry is obviously presented very badly.
Yeah.
Lobotomies, beating up patients, the main character fakes mental illness, the Ratch is in there. There was a study done in 1983 that tested the effects of watching One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest on a test group, and it found that the film had an overwhelmingly negative impact on their views of mental illness.
Well, yeah,
right.
yeah. Well, yeah, that makes sense.
I actually think the film might have aged well in that regard, and that the patients are presented favourably and in a more likeable way through today's lens.
Yeah.
Though people who know a lot more about the subject than me may disagree. I'd be interested to see what the results of a study like that were now, though, on young people.
Yeah.
Either way, the film definitely had a major impact. There was a doctor as well, a well-known psychiatrist called Frank Pittman, and he said the book and the film had an enormous impact on his field. So it was, and is, I think, significant outside Hollywood as well as inside.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to be in complete agreement with you guys. There's nothing that you've said that I cannot really say again. I mean, it's very, very impactful on society and an eye-opener because the way it was shot, how it was shot, why it was shot, choosing to shoot it in an actual location. You know, there's nothing Hollywood about this. Miloš Forman keeping it European. I think that's foreign automatically to people. And I think it's a foreign subject shot in a foreign way. And on an American audience especially, or even on a Western audience, they'd be going, wow, what is this? And all of these things go hand in hand to deliver the message and to hit it home. And is that, you know, it is timeless and it does work. This kind of gave them permission to do that.
Yeah, for sure. No sequel for Cuckoo's Nest then, nor should there be, but with its huge influence in and outside the industry, the star turn from Nicholson and its status as the definitive mental asylum film, its legacy is always going to be there, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's huge.
All the right movies ranking.
We're at the end then. Flown the Nest. So now it's time for the big reveal, our rankings for the film. Westy, you put this one up, so do you want to kick it off? Your summary and score for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, please.
Me?
I can't believe it took you 2 hours to get that in there.
I waited for the end.
The face you pulled was perfect as well.
I know. That was perfect, Cheswick.
If you say so yourself.
Yeah. Big praise.
Yeah.
That was perfect.
Not a compliment either. Yes, I mean, Cuckoo's Nest did as well as we could expect it to do, as well as it expected to do, and it exceeded expectations. And for me, it's still important. It's got such incredible themes that have been so bravely explored. It really does make you sit and think, what does it mean to be human? It kind of makes you want to be a better person. It makes you want to reassess things, and you put things in perspective and you rearrange your order of importance in what it is to be alive and what it is to be happy and what it truly, truly means to wake up every day. And it makes it really, really important. Themes that are unfortunately timeless and unfortunately still incredibly relevant, and it still really, really works for me now. I'll recommend this film to anybody at any time. It's a masterpiece and it's a definite 10.
Oof. huge score, and it is a huge film.
Yeah.
I mean, widely regarded as one of the greatest to come out of Hollywood, and for good reason. Tackles a big and tough subject matter of mental illness, and does so with a message, with thematic depth. It features, for me, the greatest performance of a movie icon in Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
Ratchet stands up today as a brilliant villain, and I would also recommend it as essential viewing for anyone. There are a couple of moments where it sags a bit for me, most notably the fishing boat sequence, and it does bother me, the negative impact that it had on the reputation of mental illness in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
But I mean, the filmmaking is superb, top to bottom. Miloš Forman's first of two all-time classics, and for me, not quite full marks, but it's a 9 out of 10.
Wow, okay.
And Matt, your summary and score for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
Yep, it's always been massive for me, this one. Like I said, I just felt it was a real eye-opener back when I was 18, 19, when I first watched it. I don't watch it frequently, but that's only because it's one of those films you have to be sparing with it, I think.
Yeah, you can't. I've got your VHS.
Well, yeah, that's it. Still waiting, 20 years on.
Yeah.
Whenever I do watch it, I wanted to have the same impact that it did on first viewing. And it is obviously a tough watch at times, but when I do rewatch it, I just find there's more and more to get into. And as I've mentioned, it's a film where I've changed the stance that I have on characters and themes. So coming back to it, to find it can do that, to have that depth, to have that moral complexity is no small achievement.
Yeah.
I think, like you, John, I could live without the fishing trip sequence, but Nicholson and Fletcher are just monumentally good in this. I'll always come back to this. It's always been a favourite. It'll always be a 10.
Beautiful.
Well, now it's time for the real crazies. Or Twitter, or X followers. Some of their comments on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Laura Ledford at Millie Hag said, Jack is great, and I don't always think that. This role was made for him. I can't imagine anyone else doing it justice. Such a well-crafted film. Fletcher is brilliant. You cheer through tears, the chief for taking care of Jack at the end. Taking care of it, delicately put by Laura there.
Yeah, very delicately. Yeah,
I agree. Nicholson's best for me.
yeah definitely.
I'd agree.
Mark Jones at Dom_Mark said, as a 15-year-old, I invited my girlfriend to this unknown movie with the sole intention of satisfying my hormone demands.
What a choice.
Everything went to plan. Back row, arm around the shoulder. Minutes into the film, I'd forgotten I was with someone. The randy little devil. I mean, to be fair, electroshock therapy is a definite passion killer.
It is a bit, yeah. I wonder what his mother thinks of his behaviour.
And Brown at brownest_and said, the book, 10. The film, 3.
Wow.
Ooh.
Staggering miscasting, completely missed the point of the way the characters come across in the book.
Right. Okay.
Right.
And we had a few comments from fans of the book bemoaning what the film had missed out or done badly.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Fair enough, I think.
So I think very much an adaptation removed from the book, it seems.
Okay, right.
And altogether, our followers rated the film as, what do you think out of 10?
10. I'm sticking to my guns here, 10.
I'll go 9.
Well, it's in the middle, 9.5 out of 10.
Oh, wow. So close.
So that gives One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest 38.5 out of 40 in total.
Yeah.
Not a surprise, this is a big scorer.
No.
Very big.
And that's it. The meeting is adjourned. Our 68 days is up.
It is.
Hopefully you like the episode and don't feel like you've been lobotomized. But next time out, staying alive is as good as it gets. And it's not the Bee Gees, it's Matt, Luke and Westy, the next best thing.
Wow.
They're getting into Danny Boyle's take on the zombie film with 28 Days Later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some harmonies on that fucker. Yeah.
John, there's no way anyone could have guessed 28 days later from your lead up there.
Yeah.
What are they doing next? Not 28 days later.
You could have easily just put like, and they're trying to stay alive, talking about 28 days later.
Well, to find out more about becoming a patron, supporting what we do, and accessing our archive and bonus episodes, please visit patreon.com/alltherightmovies. You can subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes and Apple Podcasts. Just the 5-star reviews, though.
If you don't mind.
Keep your 4 stars to yourself.
Yes, please.
Socially, you can keep up with All the Right Movies on Twitter or X, where we are at ATRightMovies. We post threads on there that tell the stories behind classic films, and everything we post has been said by somebody involved in the production or comes from 3 corroborated sources, same as on the podcast, so check that out. You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/alltherightmovies. On Instagram and Threads, we are at @all_the_right movies. You can join our movie group on Facebook as well to get involved with some great movie discussions. And our website, full of great features, is alltherightmovies.com.
A lot to get your teeth into there.
We're all off now to watch the World Series and get some juicy fruit.
Absolutely. Sounds great.
Well, me and Westy are. Matt's off out bird dogging chicks and banging beaver, as usual. Please do come back next time, though, for 28 Days Later. We're talking about farm, we're talking about content, we're talking about
Jump up there and
relationships.
stick it in the basket. Chief!
Please do come back next time, though, for 28 Days Later. We're talking about farm,
Hit me.
we're talking about content, we're talking about
Jump up there and
interrelationships.
stick it in the basket. Chief! I want my cigarettes. I want my cigarettes. I want my cigarettes. I don't want a cigarette. I want my cigarettes.
You all right, Westy? Go get the medication.